What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto watched his friends die and decided to burn the Shinobi world to ashes? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description for original creator of this beautiful creation. Naruto's eyes shot open and he gasped for air. He grabbed at his chest, where his heart lay beating brightly. He took quite a few deep calming breaths while sifting through his recent memories. The last thing he could recall is using a suicide sealing technique. It was the only way he could think of defeating Kagaya Otsutsuki. That meant, if he remembers things correctly, he is no longer in the world of the living. For some reason, he had expected death to feel different, perhaps cold even. Instead, it is rather comfortable, like lying on a fluffy cloud. Deciding to examine the afterlife, he shifted his head to the right. He noted that he is lying on an exquisite-looking white couch that is exceptionally out of his price range. Two full fluffy black pillows rested on each corner, one that he just happened to find his head resting on. Honestly, he would have loved to own these pillows. Snapping out of his pillow daze, he reluctantly sat up and glanced around the area. He discovered that he woke up in a strangely decorated room. The room itself is massive in comparison to his apartment. It felt like comparing a simple broom closet to a master bedroom. He didn't know how he felt about that tidbit of knowledge. Sleek wooden flooring reflected the lights that shined brightly from the light fixtures in the room. The walls are a pearl white with a few framed pictures of varying landscapes hung up. A black coffee table sat a short distance away from the couch. What managed to catch his eye, however, is the incredibly thin advanced television hanging in front of him. Underneath is a black stand with electronics he couldn't recognize. Opposite of the television is a large glass window that reached from the floor to the ceiling. It showed a fantastic view of a beautiful futuristic city. Buildings of glass and stone climbed their way to the heavens while glowing brightly. It is reminiscent of the towers you could find in a megacure. The dark sky is almost entirely devoid of stars, which he admittedly found odd with how clear that sky is, but a bright full moon. Nice place, right? A soft feminine voice asked lightly from beside him. Naruto jumped like a cat in fright and tumbled off the couch onto the wooden floor. Quickly climbing back to his feet, he turned toward the voice and got into a defensive stance. It surprised him to find a young girl, but he continued to eye her warily. She has long flowing blonde hair that reached her waist, and a childlike face. Her large round sky blue eyes sparkled like stars as they peered into his own. She wore a white long-sleeved t-shirt that hugged her petite frame. The baggy jet black sweatpants completed the outfit. If he guessed, he would assume she is around 13, possibly 14. That didn't really say much if she is a threat or not. Looks could be deceiving. Who are you? Naruto exclaimed in shock, fighting down the urge to crouch and point at the young girl. Her eyes flashed with amusement as a little mirth-filled smile grew on her cute face. You know, it's considered polite to introduce yourself first before asking another, she stated, tilting her head to the side slightly. His stance faltered ever so slightly at the rebuttal. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, he replied, stumbling over his own words. The small girl's smile grew, showing some of her pearly white teeth. It's a pleasure to meet you, Naruto. I'm Kami, she replied with exceptional levels of mirth. Her eyes danced as her guest froze in place. Just as Kami witnessed, Naruto froze in place with that critical information. This is just like his luck. Of course, he would wake up beside Kami. Why couldn't I just wake up in a ramen resort? Naruto cried mentally. He fought down the urge to pout. Now is not a good time to upset a goddess who rules over everything. Well, at least this confirms if I'm dead or not. Dear Kami, help me, he thought with a dramatic sigh. Oh, help you with what? Kami asked with an innocent smile. Huh? The blonde boy said dumbly. You asked me to help you. What do you need help with? Kami asked, her entire demeanor of perfect innocence. The spiky blonde might have fallen for it if he didn't see her eyes. They had a look of someone who is messing with you and having fun doing it. It's a look he often gave people when he got caught up in mischief. He decided right then and there that he didn't like being on the opposite side of it. Just thinking over my luck on how I'm dead and woke up beside, well, you. Naruto exasperated before letting out another sigh. This isn't how he planned his afterlife experience to go. His vision started with white fluffy clouds and his loving family and friends waving and cheering at him. They would have an emotional scene with hugging and crying, followed with laughter and joy. Instead, he got a lowly goddess, which he believes might have a prankster side. Sniffling caught the taller blonde's attention. What, did you not want to see me? Cammy said with tear-filled eyes while giving him the most hurtful look she could muster. Anyone who saw her in this state would assume Naruto popped her balloon, stole her lollipop, and killed her puppy. Naruto's eyes widened in panic at seeing the small goddess start to cry. What? He choked out. No, I'm thrilled to see you. I would rather see you than anyone else right now. I promise, he rambled placatingly. The last thing he wished to do is get on the wrong side of a goddess. He imagined things would not go over well for him. You mean it? Cammy said, sniffling while wiping away her tears. He nodded. Cammy's face did a complete 180, a bright smile forming on her face. It almost gave the deceased shinobi whiplash. Oh, goody. I'm so glad, she said, steepling her hands together. At this point in time, Naruto's stance is completely forgotten from the surreal moment. His instincts told him that while she is extraordinarily powerful, she most likely didn't mean him any harm. Well, Naruto is never one to go against his instincts. He just hoped that they weren't wrong. An awkward silence filled the room for a few moments. So, where am I? Naruto asked, staring into the smaller blonde's pretty blue eyes. In my living room. Oh, why am I in your living room? Cammy put a hand to her chin like she is in deep thought while humming. She tilted her head to the side. I was bored, she stated with a half-hearted shrug. Plus, I wanted the company, and I think we'll have a lot of fun together, she replied truthfully. Naruto blinked slowly at her response, not entirely sure how to react. His prankster instincts are still on edge, and he trusted those as much as he loved ramen. I see, he said slowly. What exactly did you want to do together? He asked her warily. We're going to watch some TV together, she chirped, shifting her eyes to her flat-screen television. Of course, we're not going to be watching simple cartoons or dramas. Instead, we're going to watch exciting moments from other worlds that star you as the main character. I figured we can do this until I get bored again, she answered with a shrug. Worlds where I'm the main character. Well, you see, you're what I like to call a main soul. That means you're a focal point for entire worlds of infinite possibility to be born around. Your very existence is destined to be interesting. So, while your life may have ended tragically short, other versions of you are still going strong. She commented excitedly while taking a seat on her couch. She softly patted the seat beside her. Naruto idly sat down beside that small goddess while pondering over everything he just learned. It's a bit confusing being told that multiple worlds revolve around him. It's kind of cool if he's honest with himself. Alright, sounds like fun, he responded curiously. He wanted to know what other versions of himself are like. You accepted that rather easily, Cammy said airily. In my life, I've learned to just accept things as they come, he stated truthfully, nodding his head sagely. She hummed thoughtfully. Okay, well, let's get started, she said as she grabbed the remote and the television flashed to life. The screen showed a vast forest. A deadly forest that Naruto had once been eaten by a giant snake in. Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death. It is said to have been created by the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju. The pure natural energy around the forest is so potent, inhabitants of the forest grew to incredible sizes with ferocious appetites. The training ground is mostly used in training Anbu to survive in hostile environments. However, sometimes for the unlucky genin, it's used for the survival portion of the Chunin exams. This year it just happened to be hosting the Chunin exams where the objective is to collect either the scroll of heaven or earth from an opposing team. You could simply steal the scroll stealthily or fight them into submission. If you desired, you could even murder the enemy. In this forest, anything went. The contestants knew what they signed up for when they went in. So, the fault of their possible death rested on their shoulders, and their shoulders only. One such team rushing through the forest currently is Team 7. It consisted of Sasuke Uchiha, famously known as the last loyal Uchiha to Konoha. Sakura Haruno, co-leader of the Sasuke Uchiha fan club. Finally, Naruto Uzumaki, a mysterious blonde with a hidden past. Their current goal is to find a team and quickly escape the Dead Woods. At least, that's Sasuke and Sakura's goal. Naruto, on the other hand, has a different purpose. One that is always being accomplished as long as he stayed in the presence of the Uchiha. The scene playing on the television zoomed in on the three members of Team 7. Sasuke and Sakura both looked like Naruto remembered way back in his past. However, he looked completely different. Much to his horror, his other self didn't wear a smidge of orange. Instead, this Naruto wore a jet black sleeveless t-shirt that showed off his sun-kissed shoulders. A light gray Jonin-styled vest over top of it, dark gray Anbu-styled pants with knee padding and black armored shinobi sandals. Naruto stared at his counterpart with noticeable confusion. I look kind of cool, but where is the orange? He wondered out loud, receiving a deadpan expression from the goddess sitting beside him. Also, this is kind of weird with the narration. It's like someone is reading me a story from a book, you know? He commented. The goddess personally liked what this version of Naruto is wearing a lot more than the horrendous neon orange jumpsuit he wore back then. It isn't like she has a problem with orange, she rather liked the color. The issue itself is the disgusting design of the jumpsuit the younger Naruto wore. This version of you was raised differently, hence the change in fashion sense, Kami replied evenly. Naruto nodded his head in understanding, but that still didn't really explain one massive detail. That doesn't really explain the lack of orange. It's the best color, and needs proper representation, he said in a deadly serious tone. Would it make you feel better if I told you that this Naruto still loves orange? That would help, yes. Kami noticed him looking at her expectantly. The goddess rolled her eyes. He adores the color orange, she sighed. Good, he breathed a breath of relief. At least he understands what the best color in the world is. That's still you, the small goddess stated, looking at him like he's an idiot. That only proves my point, he stated in a matter-of-fact tone. Kami opened her mouth to retort but quickly shut her mouth. She could see a losing battle and simply turned back to watching the television. Perhaps I should have chosen a smarter Naruto, but it wouldn't have been the Naruto I liked, she thought. A powerful gust of wind tore through the trees, almost throwing Naruto far away into the lethal forest. Thankfully, he managed to keep chakra circulating through his feet and stick to the large branch underneath him. His well-honed instincts went on guard. What the hell was that? Sakura screeched out in a panic, her emerald eyes glancing around the dark forest. A futon jutsu, Naruto answered automatically, a powerful one at that. Stay on guard, he warned coolly. Sasuke grunted, his body shifting into a defensive stance. Stop trying to act cool, Naruto baka. This is dangerous. Stop trying to outshine my Sasuke-kun. The pink-haired girl screamed, raising her fist threateningly. It managed to hurt both her teammates' ears. The girl took a lot of pride in her lung capacity. Naruto sighed heavily, regretting ever accepting this assignment. Damn you, Hokage-sama, he cursed mentally. He needed a drink, and that's saying a lot since he didn't even drink. Hell, he couldn't get drunk with his tenant washing out the poison faster than he could drink it. What's wrong with Sakura? She seems more, Naruto asked before trailing off at the end. Bitchy? Kami supplied. Yeah, Naruto accepted. Why is that? He asked, slightly concerned. His version of Sakura was a tad whiny in the past, but never so loud and bitchy. Well, maybe a bit noisy, but he was 2 at that age. Yes, she would call him a baka, but that was just her thing. In some way, it almost became endearing from her. This version of Sakura never had you as a punching bag in the academy. Her self-esteem took a bigger hit without your constant praises, and she became an even more die-hard fan of the Uchiha. You randomly popped up and outclassed the Uchiha in everything, upsetting her beloved. Now, Sakura berates you constantly to hopefully appease her desire's ego, Kami answered, summarizing the information. Huh, Naruto said, turning back to the television. An older woman stood in front of Team 7, in the process of deep-throating a scroll that they just happened to need. Her tongue slithered out and licked her lips. She even managed the impressive feat of touching her own nose. The disturbed faces of Team 7 didn't go unnoticed by the assailant who smirked. I can do that too, Sasuke-kun. Sakura randomly blurted out, rubbing her throat idly. The attacker, Naruto, and Sasuke stared at her with what could be described as a what the fuck face. In the middle of a life-or-death situation, she says something that not only managed to throw them off but their enemy as well. If only she managed to do that without friendly fire. The woman coughed into her hand, gathering the attention of the boys again, a little upset at the pink-haired girl for running her creepy entrance. She would manage though, they were still mostly disturbed with her scroll-sucking technique. Not to mention, her tongue touching her nose would impress them enough to realize how big of a threat she truly is. "Sasuke-kun, I've come for you," she said boldly, in a seductive way. "You bitch," Sakura growled, her emerald eyes glowing with absolute murder at this whore. She worked her ass off stalking him, collecting things he discarded, thank you old underwear, and even rubbing his face when he slept peacefully in his room. How dare this new girl suddenly appear and try to take away her Prince Charming? "I appreciate the confession, but I'm not interested," the Uchiha said awkwardly, ignoring the cheering fangirl beside him. "Oh, are you sure? I can give you the power you desire to kill Itachi-kun," the woman said enticingly. Naruto decided to observe this, as this decision would reflect on his current mission. If things went the way he expected, there would not be a full Team 7 any longer. Depending on the situation, there may not be any member of Team 7 soon. He could tell that their attacker is suppressing her chakra. Whoever this woman is extraordinarily dangerous. Sasuke's eyes lit up like someone just handed him a gift basket filled to the brim with tomatoes. "Well, let's not be rash here. What type of power are we talking about here?" Sasuke asked cautiously. "Never let it be said that he's an idiot, just power hungry." "Let me bite your neck, and I'll show you real power," the woman said, winking flirtatiously. Naruto felt disturbed, Sakura felt rage, while Sasuke is merely confused. Yes, she would bite him and grant him her infamous curse seal. The taste of power would have him running to her in hopes of further training. Then, she would have his sweet body all to herself. This is a lot easier than going after Itachi. The woman thought happily. This fight is a lot more disturbing than I remember, Naruto said slowly. He isn't positive, but he felt like there is a UAL undertone hidden throughout the dialogue. That made it a lot more disturbing to picture. "Yeah," Cammy snickered, "but it's pretty funny," she stated, trying to stifle her laughter with her right hand. The disturbed faces and innuendos in this scene are great. She loved battle monologues. "Hell no. If anyone's biting his neck, it's going to be me, you whore." Sakura roared, losing herself in righteous anger. She charged headfirst at the woman who just raised an eyebrow. To the pink-haired girl, all problems in life could be solved with a mean right hook. It had yet to fail her. Just as Sakura was about to smash the woman in the face, the woman raised her hand. What seemed like slow motion, but was truthfully relatively quick, Sakura got bitch slapped. The girl went flying with an incredible amount of force directly into a tree. Sadly, an exceedingly sharp branch happened to be in her root, which impaled her straight through the stomach. She screamed in pain before coughing up an impressive amount of blood before dying of shock. Let the world know, Sakura Haruno died via bitch slap. "Sakura!" Naruto screamed at the television, eyes filled with horror. He may not have known this version of Sakura or liked her, but it's still Sakura. Watching her die in such a gruesome way is horrifying. Cammy gently patted the blonde boy's back. "If it makes you feel any better, she planned on poisoning your ramen after the exams to make her Uchiha feel better," she said, not really caring about the girl. She has only ever liked Sakura in a few timelines, but for some reason, it's in her very existence to be an annoying bitch until she entered her late teens. Unbelievably, she would occasionally get even worse in her late teens. That stopped Naruto from feeling bad right on the spot. It's one thing to poison him, beat him up, even mortally wound him, but it's a whole different issue to defile the food of the gods. Ramen is pure and deserved nothing less than to be savored and treated with respect. "Why would she hurt ramen?" he said sadly, truly not understanding what could compel someone to do something so vile. Cammy stared at her companion and felt the urge to smack him on the back of the head. She just explained that this version of Sakura planned on murdering him in cold blood, but instead, he is worried about noodles. "I think he puts ramen on a higher pedestal than myself," she thought wryly. The woman blinked incredulously at the pink-haired girl's pathetic death. She didn't even hit her that hard, and she still managed to find a way to die. While that is undoubtedly impressive, it was not her original goal. Damn, not how is Sasuke-kun supposed to pass the exam? Time for plan B, she thought, ideas and plans rattling around inside her mind. Naruto and Sasuke both stared blankly at their teammate's death. The smartest girl in the academy had managed to rush an enemy who is clearly far superior to them and died via backhand into a tree branch. They both looked at one another before nodding their heads. If they survived this encounter, they would say she died an honorable death. Mostly because this is embarrassing for them. Sasuke-kun, you've already failed the exam with her death. Come, join me, and I'll give you power that will rival Kage. The assailant cried out passionately as if selling a product. Luckily for her, when dealing with Sasuke Uchiha, you could sell him a broken pen if you mentioned power. Sasuke thought very hard about this offer. The woman is clearly strong and offering free power. The cons are, he would become a missing nin, tarnish the Uchiha name even more, and leave his rival. However, the pros outweighed the cons. Power to kill Ichiha had no price. The choice is evident to him. He isn't getting more powerful here, so why not go somewhere else? I accept your proposal. Anything to kill him, he said, spitting out him, like it's the vilest thing he ever put in his mouth. Naruto's blue eyes narrowed as his hand slowly reached into his pouch on his hip. It appeared that Team 7 is officially disbanded. His mission is to watch over Sasuke Uchiha, a possible flight risk, and to eliminate if he turned traitor. Much to the village's dismay, it appeared the Uchiha clan is about to be down one more member. The woman's neck stretched out disturbingly and clenched down on the Uchiha's neck. A moan of pain and pleasure escaped the boy's lips. Just as quickly as it extended, her neck retracted back to her body as she licked the blood from her lips. The Uchiha's neck now sported a seal that immediately started causing pain to the holder. Just before Sasuke passed out from the pain, a kunai lodged itself directly into the side of Sasuke's head. His body went limp and hit the massive wooden branch with a loud thump. Sasuke Uchiha died alongside his one-sided lover, a traitor to his village. The woman blinked in shock as her plans went up in flames. Sakura's dead eyes flashed with horror, as her beloved perished alongside her. Sasuke's eyes stared ahead blankly. Naruto looked at the body of his deceased teammate before turning his attention to the woman who just gazed off into space. He didn't understand why his actions were so shocking. Sasuke literally said he was turning traitor in front of him. Did they honestly believe he would let that happen? You killed Sasuke-kun, the woman mumbled absently. Indeed, Naruto said blandly. I killed Sasuke, Naruto mumbled in shock. He would admit, Sasuke and him have had their differences. His brother in all but blood continually trying to kill him and his friends, to name a couple. However, he didn't think he had it in him to kill his best friend, though. Yes, you did, Cammy commented, nodding her head sagely. She enjoyed a bit of dark humor, a secret only a few knew. She found the suddenness of the Uchiha's death to be hilarious. Just by Naruto's counterpart killing that boy, he managed to screw up so many future enemy plans. Though, looking at Naruto's grief-stricken face, maybe she should have started with something lighter. She decided to do something to cheer her fellow blonde up by summoning a hot bowl of miso pork ramen in front of him. Naruto's nose twitched, signaling him to the smell of heaven. A fresh steaming bowl of hot miso pork ramen appeared to him in his time of sadness. A blessing from the ramen gods, perhaps? Is this their way to make him feel better for watching his two friends die in front of him? Thank you, ramen gods, Naruto prayed to his ramen gods, which did not go unheard by Cammy, whose eye twitched. You're welcome, my child, the miso broth bubbled majestically. Naruto's eyes sparkled like stars in the night sky. They are real, he thought out in joy. Cammy's eyes, on the other hand, opened in shock. They're real? She thought in confusion. There is a god of death, a god of darkness, and a god of light. However, somehow down the line, enough people worshipped ramen to create a god. To make matters worse, the false one just claimed credit for her kind deed. The blonde boy, unaware of the slight, slurped down his ramen hungrily. The sadness from his two teammates' death vanished when he realized they aren't his Sasuke and Sakura. They're that Naruto's Sasuke and Sakura. He lost nothing, and that's just fine with him. Orochimaru, who disguised himself as a woman, stared at the dead Uchiha. All of his plans, all his dreams, ended by a damn blonde and a kunai. He thought about this for a quick second. Minato Namikaze stole his rightful position as Hokage from him with a kunai as well, and he was also blonde. He eyed Naruto warily, Perhaps blondes are bad luck? While the mysteriously perverted woman, as far as Naruto knew, continued her self-monologue, Naruto got to work. He quickly replaced himself and his teammates with shadow clones. He had no reason to stay in this damn forest any longer now that his real mission is completed. Sure, they lost an asset, and the Uchiha clan is no longer present in Konoha, but it was for the best. Hopefully, the enemies of Konoha would see this as a sign of weakness. He soon reached the boundary of the forest and leapt over the fence. This, of course, got caught on camera, which immediately disqualified him from the exams. Luckily for this blonde, he is already higher than a simple chunin. Only a select few knew that, but soon they would all know. The television turned off, signaling the end of the scene. It was one of the shorter ones, but it was interesting enough. Cammy had already seen this one before, but she wanted to wean her fellow blonde in. Admittedly, she shouldn't have chosen a rather dark one. Yami must be rubbing off on her. So, what did you think? Cammy asked curiously. Well, it was different than I remembered for sure. I was blown away by that gust of wind and eaten by a giant snake last time, Naruto said, shivering in disgust. When I managed to get back to Sasuke and Sakura, they were both pretty beaten up. Orochimaru fought a little more with us before knocking me out with his glowing fingers. Sometime down the line, he gave Sasuke his curse Hiki, he informed the small goddess. This fight, however, was a lot more vocal than I remember. Not to mention, a lot more disturbing. I am sad to see Sakura be, well, like that, he said, not happy with the way his friend was portrayed. It felt shameful, like she was disgracing her own memory, you know? Naruto said dryly. Funny enough, that is actually one of her tamer version, Cammy said, chuckling lightly. Seriously? Naruto asked in shock. Oh yeah, there are versions where she goes crazy or more violent. Sometimes she even goes traitor alongside her dear Sasuke. I know of one version where she went yandere for you. She started killing all your friends out of jealousy and fear that you would love them more than herself, she commented, shrugging her shoulders. Yandere Sakura? Naruto parroted. That's really scary to think about, he said, shivering. Yup, are there any weird versions of myself? He asked, unable to hold back his curiosity. Of course. For example, there is a fun version of yourself that is a perverted bounty hunter that goes by the name Senju, she giggled excitedly, blushing a little. Naruto gained a look of horror, which made her laugh harder. She understood why. One of Naruto's greatest fears is turning into a pervert like his sensei and master. His pure innocence couldn't handle being a pervert. At least, not yet, she thought. Oh, don't feel bad. You're actually quite the ladies' man, Cammy said with a smirk, amusement clearly written on her face. I'm not sure if that makes me feel better or not. Better, probably. Anyways, you ready for the next scene? As ready as I'll ever be. Cammy smiled before turning toward the television. She clicked a few buttons on her remote, and the screen flashed to life. The next scene began. Sasuke. Naruto roared loudly over the rapid waterfall. A young spiky blonde-haired boy stood on top of Hashirama Senju's stone head, located in the Valley of the End. His blindingly bright neon orange jumpsuit worn and torn from fighting Orochimaru's Sound 4. He fought his hardest to catch up to his best friend, even sadly leaving behind his comrades while they continued to fight. The lone Uchiha turned around slowly to stare at his rival. Naruto, you just can't seem to stay away. Sasuke muttered lowly while standing on top of Madara Uchiha's stone head opposite of the blonde. The situation from a spectator's point of view made it look quite symbolic. His clothes, unlike his rival, are unscathed. His skin not bruised in the slightest, but one could see he is slightly worn down from the effects of upgrading the curse seal. To achieve the second level, one must first die. To counter that requirement, the Sound 4 sealed into an urn until the process completed. The pain took a toll. The dark-haired boy stared passively at his blonde friend. What do you want, Dobi? Sasuke asked in a loud, concise manner. What do I want? Naruto growled out. What do I want? What do you think I want, you bastard? He shouted out, his hand furling into fists. I want you to come back home to the village with me, damn it, he stated passionately. He couldn't, no, he wouldn't allow his best friend to walk down this horribly dark path. He would save the most important person in his life, no matter the cost. Naruto and Cammy both watched the scene play out with mild interest. Naruto felt a knot form in his stomach as he remembered this from his past. It's the day his best friend and brother in all but blood betrayed him. The day he became a traitor to the village and attempted to sever their bond. While Sasuke believed he could, Naruto knew that their connection was too secure. Naruto glanced over to his fellow blonde with a questioning look. "I don't see much of a difference from when I went through this," he pointed out. The small goddess nodded her head in agreement. "I agree, but something significant must be different for it to get bookmarked," she informed, shrugging her shoulders while watching the passionate scene unfold. It truly is a tear-jerking moment for sure. A tale of two brothers, not of blood but circumstance, destined to fight one another. That got a raised eyebrow from the male. "Bookmarked?" he questioned curiously. He felt that that term is a strange term to use when not dealing with a book. Cammy turned toward her guest and decided to explain. "Every human being has their life recorded in their own book of life. You can read everything there is to know about someone in them. From their darkest secrets to their greatest fantasies. However, your book is unique when compared to others. So unique that I decided to transform it into the television you see before you," she said, but noticed he didn't seem to quite understand. "Think of it as a massive tree. Every living person has a trunk, and some even manage to grow a few limbs if they're unique enough. You, on the other hand, have sprouted thousands of branches with endless possibilities," she said, and got a look of understanding that allowed her to continue. "Now, I've set up your book of life to record every single interesting scene, kind of like folding the edge of a page. That allows me to easily watch them instead of sifting through thousands of bland ones. So, something has to be different here. Otherwise, it would have been skipped," the divine entity finished, turning back to the screen. Sasuke stared passively at his former teammate, but on the inside, his emotions ran rampant. His charcoal eyes looked into the unwavering sapphires of his friend. He turned his head away. "I can't come back to the village with you, Naruto. I have to get stronger to kill him." He spat that worst word out like venom. "I need to leave to get the power I need. Don't you understand?" he said, mumbling the question to himself. He fully turned his body away, prepared to leave. His eyes misted as he betrayed his best friend. Naruto couldn't accept that answer. "Sasuke, please, I love you," he yelled out emotionally, his sapphire blue eyes starting to tear up. He raised his hand over his heart and clenched his chest. His heart was beating incredibly fast. "You're too important for me to just let you go. I need you," he shouted, salty tears washing down his whiskered cheeks as he laid his heart out. Naruto stared at the scene in awe. "Wow, I can't believe I have such a strong brotherly bond with this version of Sasuke," Naruto stated breathlessly. He wouldn't admit it out loud, but he is slightly jealous of his counterpart's ability to say those words with so much conviction and emotion. He always considered his bond with Sasuke to be unbreakable, but compared to this, it felt weak. The gears in Cammy's head worked furiously before they all click into place, and she understood. Oh my," she said, placing her hand over her mouth to try and prevent the chuckles from escaping. She didn't fully succeed in that endeavor. She now understood why this particular scene got recorded. Brotherly bond, indeed, she thought mirthfully. Naruto heard soft heavenly giggles coming from beside him and turned to look at the blonde-haired girl with a raised eyebrow. He didn't see what was so funny about the scene unfolding in front of him. "What?" he asked, clearly confused. He glanced back at the television. "I wish I had a strong bond like this with Sasuke," he said, getting more laughter and a few snorts from his fellow blonde. After staring at her in confusion while she seemed to be choking on her own laughs, he eventually went back to watching the screen. Sasuke's eyes widened at his best friend's confession. Never in all of his years did he ever expect to hear those words leave his blonde companion's mouth. Does Naruto really love me? Is he just saying that to get me to come back? Am I really that important to him? His mind exploded with questions, but no answers followed. You don't mean that," he screamed, his own tears now trailing down his cheeks. "I do. You're everything to me. Please, come back to the village with me," Naruto cried out. "It's too late for that, Naruto," Sasuke replied shakily. "It's never too late to do the right thing. Please, Sasuke, for me," the spiky blonde-haired shinobi begged. Sasuke didn't know what to do. He thought this chosen path would be the easiest. All he wanted to do is gain enough power to avenge his fallen clan, so they could finally rest peacefully. So, why did his heart yearn to choose Naruto instead of this path? He shut his eyes, a spark of determination entering his eyes. If you want me to come back, you'll have to make me. He called out with conviction. If that's what it takes, then so be it. Naruto shouted out. A silent breeze passed between them before Naruto leapt over the ravine and tackled Sasuke to the ground, punching him in the face. Sasuke's head slammed roughly against his stone ancestor's head. Blood pooled inside the Uchiha's mouth as he glared and spit in Naruto's face. The blonde, startled by the action, quickly retaliated with another punch. Flame-like marking began crawling over the Uchiha's body, his right eye changing alongside it. Sasuke felt unimaginable strength force itself through his coils. His right hand shot outward and wrapped tightly around his best friend's neck. He slowly climbed to his feet with the blonde dangling in the air. Naruto felt his lungs burning for oxygen as his throat is slowly crushed. Desperately, he slammed his forehead against his opponent's with as much strength as he could muster. The hand around his neck vanished, and he fell unceremoniously to the ground. He coughed, his lungs sucking in the air greedily. Next thing he knew, a foot slammed into his face, launching him off the statue and plummeting toward the ground. The lone Uchiha peered over the ledge and watched the blonde fall toward the ground before he heard a loud crash. Dust raised from the crater and pulled into the air around the blonde. Suddenly, a massive presence pressed down on his shoulders. He remembered it from the Suna invasion. It felt dark, no evil, bloodthirsty, and oppressive. It's the complete opposite of his friend, who holds an aura of warmth and cheerfulness. With his Sharingan activated, he could easily see his friend's appearance. Naruto's once sapphire blue eyes melted into a bloody crimson with a slit pupil. Malice surrounded him, yet his face betrayed his true feelings that showed only depression and sadness. Naruto stared up at his rival with his improved eyesight. He could see his best friend staring down at him. It felt poetic. Sasuke always looked down at him while he always looked up. Sasuke held similar thoughts as his blonde rival. He always looked down at Naruto for being an idiot, the dead last of his class. Naruto isn't as smart nor skilled, but the blonde held an ability he didn't. The ability to smile and see past his misfortune. The ability to never give up. Naruto shined like the sun while he stood in the dark like the moon. Naruto took off running up the statue, while Sasuke ran down, their feet clinging to the stone. They met in the middle where Naruto threw a punch that got easily countered by the Uchiha. Sasuke elbowed him in the nose before craning an axe kick toward the top of his head, sending him plummeting back toward the solid ground below. Naruto watched the fight scene play out with half interest. The fight, while slightly different, is still mostly the same. He sent a sideways glance at the goddess beside him, who finally stopped laughing for whatever odd reason. He bit the side of his cheek and looked down at the table in front of him. A clean bowl once filled to the brim with beautiful majestic ramen laid empty. "Oh, ramen gods, may you please spare more of your heavenly broth and noodles?" Naruto prayed, his heart filled with hope and longing. Kami, being able to pick up on prayers, slowly, almost robotically looked over to her blonde companion with a deadpan look. "He's literally sitting right next to me, an actual goddess who could easily give him ramen if he asked. What does he do instead? He prays to false gods," she thought dryly, but much to her amazement and horror, the once clean bowl filled with fresh steaming ramen. Even perfectly cooked pork slices appeared. "It's getting stronger," she thought worriedly. The whiskered blonde's nose twitched when it got assaulted with the heavenly aroma of ramen. Naruto's sapphire blue eyes opened slowly and immediately locked onto the fresh bowl of ramen. "Thank you, ramen gods," he thought joyfully. "You are welcome, my child. I shall always look after my own," the ramen bubbled mystically. Kami eyed the ramen suspiciously. She couldn't help but feel like someone is messing with her. She glanced around her living room for any signs of another presence but couldn't sense anyone. Her eyes returned to the ramen and glared. She would get to the bottom of these so-called ramen gods, and put an end to them. No one steals her praise and gets away with it. Naruto, unaware of Kami's internal declaration, finished slurping up the perfectly concocted ramen and breathed out a sigh of contentment. This ramen really is heavenly, he thought dreamily with a warm smile plastered on his whiskered face. He turned back toward the television and noticed the fight coming to an end. Naruto and Sasuke both appeared worse for wear as they stared at each other weakly. Both sported multiple cuts, bruises while panting heavily. The Valley of the End now held new scars from their intense battle. Craters are scattered around the area, and molten rock sluggishly flowed down the cliff walls. Both are on their last legs, yet neither of them would admit defeat. "You're coming home, with me, bastard?" Naruto said breathlessly. His left arm held his right side in pain as he slowly approached his friend. "Never, idiot," Sasuke retorted in the same breathless tone. His left arm dangled limply in the wind, clearly broken from their clash. Like his rival, he too crept forward. Naruto and Sasuke stumbled toward one another, each raising a fist slowly. With the last of their strength, they both punched one another in the face. It didn't really hurt, but it gave enough force to cause Naruto to fall back onto his back. Sasuke lost his balance and fell forward, landing on top of the blonde. The fight ended, both too tired to fight anymore. "Why?" Sasuke questioned quietly. "Why are you trying so hard?" Naruto stared ahead into the cloudy sky. "I already said it. It's because you're my best friend. I love you," he stated through slow, ragged breaths. His lung had only recently regenerated after being pierced by Sasuke. Sasuke raised his head and gazed into his friend's eyes, looking for any sign of deceit. He could only find honest love for him, shining in those bright eyes. Without a second thought, he reached down tenderly and embraced Naruto's lips with his own. Naruto's eyes widened in shock before relaxing and returning the loving kiss. Naruto's face went blank, creating a perfect poker face. Tsunade would have been proud. His mind shut down as he watched his counterpart make out with Sasuke, and he swore he saw some tongue. This wasn't supposed to happen. They're brothers, not this. He looked over to Kami with tortured eyes who chuckled in amusement. Kami did enjoy the reaction from her fellow blonde. She wasn't entirely sure of her theory and started to doubt herself as the fight got increasingly deadly. Then the kissing started, and she immediately looked over to Naruto to see his entire body stiffen. She couldn't help herself and started giggling madly. "I don't understand," Naruto said slowly, disbelief lacing his words. His mind couldn't comprehend what his eyes are witnessing. To him, this is an impossible act. "I think it's pretty obvious what's going on," Kami said in between chuckles. "We're supposed to be brothers," Naruto whispered. "I'm pretty confident you're more than brothers." She choked out, her eyes dancing with amusement. She watched the boys on the screen start tearing off their already shredded clothes. Their hands running all over one another. "This is not how it's supposed to happen." "Oh, it's happening," she replied before her own eyes widened slightly. "Oh, wow, this just went from PG-13 to N-17 in seconds," she stated, her cheeks dusting a pink. Naruto's eyes widened in sheer terror as his other and Sasuke started having hardcore after battle. His face colored multiple shades of green, and he thought down the bile in his throat. Eventually, he passed out from lack of oxygen. His mind tried its hardest to purge the imagery from his inner sanctum. Kami eyed her blonde companion as he passed out on the couch, comically foaming from the mouth. She rolled her eyes at the overdramatic act and looked back at the developing scene. She memorized every single detail. Some may argue that as a goddess, she shouldn't dignify herself with watching such a crude act. However, she's a healthy young woman, and two guys getting it on is hot. That's how she would defend herself, at least. For the hour that followed, Naruto would wake up in a daze. Soon after, he would stare at the scene and go green-faced and pass out once more. His brain tried to erase the memories, but like a fungus, they took root. In the deep recesses of his mind, a crystal-clear picture of himself and Sasuke having rough passionate would forever haunt his dreams. Kami, on the other hand, is having a much more enjoyable experience. Her eyes stayed glued to the television with an increasing vibrant blush on her cheeks. Secretly, while Naruto was passed out, she saved a copy of the scene for later educational viewing. Her blonde companion is out cold and would never know. Soon enough, the screen faded to black as the scene came to a climactic end. Like clockwork, Naruto somehow knew the scene had ended and woke up. He looked over to the small blonde goddess and noticed the deep blush. "Why?" he asked simply. "Why what?" Kami retorted innocently. "Why would you show me that? I didn't know that was going to happen, but it was hot," she admitted honestly without a care in the world. "That wasn't hot," Naruto denied heatedly. His body felt violated. He didn't know if a shower would ever give him back his purity. Cammy rolled her eyes. "I bet you'd be fine if it was two girls going at it," she replied hotly. In her mind, the scene was romantic and passionate. Naruto blushed at the imagery that passed through his mind and had the decency to look sheepish. The idea of two girls going at it did sound hot. He shook his head to clear his thoughts. "That's not what I'm saying. That point is that it was a version of me. I don't like Sasuke like that," he countered. "So, if it wasn't you, you would have been fine with it?" The tiny goddess asked curiously. "Of course," he answered quickly. He isn't against any form of love. However, when it involved himself doing unspeakable things with his brother and all but blood, he didn't like it. That's good to know," she commented thoughtfully. She shrugged her shoulder and sat in silence to let their minds settle. After a few minutes of blissful silence, she grabbed the remote once more. "You ready for the next one?" she asked. "I guess," he responded unsurely. The heavens openly wept as the world below them is ravaged. The dark gray sky blocked out most of the sun's beautiful rays of light. Rain poured down on the forest below as a group of three continued to flee silently. The group of three was once a group of four when they were sent out to scavenge for supplies. Things went poorly, and now three young adults used the last of their strength to continue running. Soon, the emotional stress became too much for a distressed Hyuga who collapsed on her knees in the mud and started crying softly. Hinata Hyuga is one of the last surviving members of the prestigious clan that once lived in Konohagakure no Sato. Her clan is gifted with a dojutsu known as the Byakugan. She has white eyes with no noticeable pupil, dark blue hair in a Heim style. She wears a light lavender, sleeveless kimono-style blouse with vertical lines. A dark purple obi is tied around her waist, short dark navy shorts with thigh-high stockings, and black high-heeled open-toed boots. "Hinata-chan, we have to keep going," a brown-haired Inuzuka said softly. He wasn't doing very well either, suffering from exhaustion. This man is known as Kiba Inuzuka, one of the last surviving members of his clan. He has messy brown hair, sharp black eyes with vertical slits and red fang markings on each cheek. His clothes were in tatters from a recent conflict. He wore a green flak jacket, black fingerless gloves, and gray pants with sandals. "Kurenai-sensei, she's gone," Hinata responded in distress, as she continued to cry on her knees. She is drenched from the downpour, and exhausted from continuously running. "Hina-chan, we have keep moving. Kurenai knew the risks coming out on this mission. We all knew we might not come back." A spiky blonde-haired man responded soothingly. He is known as Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, and hero of the Great Fourth Shinobi War. He has sun-kissed blonde hair that defied gravity, sapphire blue eyes that glowed with warmth, and three whisker birthmarks adorned on each cheek. He wore a white haori with red flames on the bottom, and orange long-sleeved shirt with black horizontal stripes on the bottom, jet black pants and sandals. "I can't believe she's gone just like Shino-kun," she said mournfully. "Her sacrifice saved our lives, she's a hero, Hina-chan," Naruto said softly. "Guys, they found us and they're closing in on us quickly," Kiba shouted out in alarm, his heightened senses picking up the dreadful enemy that recently took their friend and sensei from them. Naruto and Cammy are watching the scene intensely. The scene looked right out of a high-production horror film. They are both trying to figure out exactly what is going on but didn't have enough information. From what they understood, Kurenai and Shino were killed on a mission. "Poor Hinata-chan, what do you think is going on?" Naruto asked the lowly goddess sitting beside him. It hurt him to see his friends losing people so important to them. Cammy hummed in thought as she studied the ongoing scene. "I don't know, maybe a war," she thought out loud. It wouldn't be the first time humans decided to wage war right after another. "I hope not, we worked so hard for peace." Naruto sighed heavily. "Let's just watch more and figure out what's going on," Cammy said, trying to reassure her fellow blonde. "This scene is more serious than the last two from the looks of it." She had to admit though, it is interesting already. Hinata stood back up and veins around her eyes bulged. She spotted them, those monsters who took her mother figure from her. Then she gasped tearfully, her eyes widened as she saw who is chasing them. Renewed tears started pouring down her cheeks but are masked by the downpour of rain. "What's going on, Hina-chan?" Naruto asked worriedly. He already has an idea of what caused her to gasp, but he prayed it wasn't true. It's too soon for her to already turn and chase after them. It's Kurenai-sensei, she's turned already. Hinata choked out. She watched as her mother figure and a group sprinted through the forest towards them. No, Kiba said painfully. He lost Akamaru to them, one of his best friends Shino, and now he lost his sensei Kurenai. To make matters worse, she is coming at them in a full sprint. We have to get moving, Naruto ordered. They couldn't risk fighting them when their strength is already so low. Maybe we can save her, Hinata said pleadingly. She knew it is a long shot, but it could happen. You know, once you change, there is no coming back. The disease turns you, changes you into one those things. They're not even human anymore, Hinata, Naruto said softly. He didn't like what he is saying, but they had to face the facts. They lost another of the resistance to a losing battle. She nodded her head weakly and turned around ready to continue fleeing from them. Kiba looked at her sadly, before nodding his head as well. All three took off in the opposite direction, trying to distance them from those things. A few minutes later, in the spot the three once stood, dull red eyes looked through the shadows of the trees. Dark figures charged past her as they continued running after their prey. An unknown lone tear fell down her cheek, then she continued with her pack to hunt down her original comrades. I feel like I'm watching a horror movie, Naruto said fearfully. They still hadn't shown what the pursuers looked like, they are all shadowed. However, those dull haunting red eyes are clearly visible in the darkness. They said it is some type of disease, Kami said quietly. A disease that changes a person from a human into a monster? She has seen zombie films before, could this be something like that? Anything is possible, so she wouldn't count it out yet. Hina-chan, what's the status on them? Naruto asked. They're gaining on us, we're not going to make it, Hinata said fearfully. She could still see her sensei giving chase right behind her. They would be on them in a few minutes. Naruto sighed sadly, then looked over to Kiba, who is barely holding himself together. It's been an honor working with you too. You're some of my closest friends, he said sorrowfully, his eyes misting. They all stopped and huddled around each other. Don't worry about it, Naruto, you tried your hardest to save us, Kiba said, his eyes watering. He grabbed Naruto into a hug and motioned for Hinata to join in. Hinata grabbed onto her friends and started crying. Naru-kun, thank you for trying. We should have been more careful, she choked out through tears. Then they heard it, the sound of a branch cracking. They are already surrounded, this will be their final battle. Slowly a woman they all recognized walked out of the shadows towards them. Her long black untamed hair blended in with the shadows around them. Her dull red eyes looked at them. Though, to their utmost horror, she is wearing a green jumpsuit with orange stripped leg warmers. Yosh, I finally found you three, now we can partake in the springtime of youth. Kurenai screamed out energetically, yet her eyes didn't match her enthusiasm. A shadowy figure stepped out of the shadows beside her. He has long bushy black hair, and dark sunglasses covering his eyes. He wore the same green spandex with orange stripped leg warmers. Our youth is like a blazing inferno, join us. Why? Because your youth will only increase our youthfulness, Shino cried out passionately. Naruto and Kami both stared at the television blankly. There are a lot of emotions going on behind their blank faces. Confusion, depression, fear, disbelief, and finally acceptance. Naruto knew back in Konoha that people used to joke about Might Guy and Rock Lee's youth being a disease. Somehow, they managed to take it literally. That's actually terrifying, Naruto finally commented, getting a light nod from Kami in return. Once in his youth, he thought the spandex was cool but was saved by Jiraiya. He never did thank him for saving him from that nightmare. Where do they even get those green jumpsuits from? Kami asked, disturbed by the fashion design. Someone out there actually designed those monstrosities, and then had the nerve to sell them. I don't know, Naruto couldn't think of anyone that would make such a thing. Then again, he couldn't really argue since he used to wear a bright neon orange jumpsuit. Stand down, Kurenai, Shino. We don't want to fight you, Naruto said sternly, hoping that some part of his friends still lived on in that thing. How unyouthful, not wanted to bask in our youthfulness. Another figure stepped out of the shadows beside them that made all three of their blood run cold. The originator, the one who started the disease. Might Guy, has a black bowl cut with the bushiest eyebrows known to man. He wore the same jumpsuit and orange leg warmers. Kurama, Naruto screamed mentally to a now panicking nine-tailed fox. He would need to synchronize if they had any chance of fighting the original. "I'm on it, Naruto," Kurama said frantically, instantly synchronizing their chakra together. He would never allow Naruto to be taken from him, they are partners. Naruto is his first friend and refused to let him go. A warm yet powerful aura shot out from Naruto, covering him in a fiery yellow cloak. He would protect his comrades, he wouldn't lose anyone else. He would end this disease here and now. "Your youth knows no bounds, Naruto-kun. Let us commence in a youthful battle," the originator said enthusiastically, giving his traditional Might Guy thumbs up and blinding smile. It sent shivers down the three young adults' spines. Kurenai charged youthfully at a fearful Hinata, and Shino did the same to his youthful friend Kiba. Naruto and the originator clashed in the middle, sending a powerful shockwave throughout the forest. "The battle of youth has started. Let's let our youth explode outwards, Naruto-kun. 8 inner gates. Gate of Wonder. Open," the originator shouted youthfully as a green aura leaked out of his body. The shockwave of power knocked everyone around them off their feet with his youthful energy. Naruto cursed as he is knocked off his feet with the sheer power Might Guy is releasing. "You truly are a terrifying shinobi, bushy your brows, but I can't let you continue to spread this terrible disease," Naruto said, preparing for an intense fight. He hadn't seen Might Guy's battle with Madara Uchiha, but he knew from what he was told, it was deadly. Konoha's biggest regret is finding a way to give him back a way to be a ninja. In his hand, he created one of his deadlier jutsu. Futon. Rasen Shuriken, a jutsu with the power to destroy an enemy on a cellular level. The speed the jutsu traveled is incredible, and by the off chance you dodge it, it can expand and capture his target. So, when he threw it, he thought that he could end it right then and there. Much to his dismay, the originator disappeared in a burst of speed and appeared behind him, kicking him in the back. "That jutsu has so much youthful energy in it," the youthful man screamed out. Naruto felt like had just been hit with a mountain. He slowly got back up to his feet and glared at his opponent, then his eyes traveled to Hinata, who is trying her best to defeat her sensei. His eyes traveled over to Kiba, who is sadly already down, much to his shock. His friend now sported a green spandex suit like everyone else. He turned away tearfully and glared hatefully at the originator. "You won't get away with this," he said angrily. "Naruto-kun, you can't stop our youth. Join us and help us bathe the world in our eternal flames of youth." The originator bargained. "Never," Naruto screamed out, charging back into battle with renewed vigor. Sadly, Naruto is running on fumes from his earlier battle. He knew he wouldn't make it out of this battle, but he isn't going to make it easy either. "Got to admit, it's an intense battle, Naruto-kun," Kami said truthfully. She could see the emotions throughout the battle. The struggle to survive and make it out with his friends, to see another comrade fall to their youth. "Yeah, I hope Bushier Brows Sensei doesn't actually start this in my world." Naruto shivered at the prospect. From what he remembered, Bushier Brows was seriously injured from his battle with Madara Uchiha and only survived thanks to him. If the disease started in his world, he would be at fault. "You're good, he is actually handicapped in your world. His youthful flames still shine brightly, but he's retired," Kami reassured with a giggle. She wouldn't wish this type of disease on anyone. Though, that begs the question, how did this youthful disease start? "What about bushy brows though?" Naruto questioned, slightly worried his friend Lee would spread the disease. Might Guy's apprentice would surely try to spread his youth. Rock Lee's youth seems to only be genetic, thankfully. The lowly goddess answered, but felt a twinge of sadness for Lee's children. "Thank goodness." Naruto breathed out a sigh of relief. "Looks like the fight is coming to a close," Kami said, pointing at the television. Naruto looked over to the television, and much to his horror, the fight is coming to an end. He is going to need at least 3 bowls of ramen to cheer him up after this horrific scene. "I wonder if I can get drunk now that I'm dead," he puzzled. Naruto laid back against a tree, breathing roughly, Kurama's cloak having run out of energy. He looked over to Kiba, who is thankfully still unconscious. He didn't want to see his friend screaming about youth. Hinata had sadly fallen halfway through his and the originator's fight. She laid unconscious, dressed in the diseased clothes. He looked up to see the man who took everything from him, smiling his bright smile, holding up that damn green jumpsuit. He knew it is over for him, and with his defeat, the resistance would soon follow. He sighed and closed his youthful eyes as the disease started taking root. He could feel Kurama trying desperately to purge it from his system. The stress on his body became too much and he passed out. The youthful disease took advantage of his weakened state and began programming his mind with a blazing inferno of youth. His youth outshined even the originator's youth. Hours later, has there been any news on Team 8 and Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze? A silver-haired man questioned the Resistance Council. This man is Kakashi Hitaki, the leader of the unyouthful resistance, the Rokudame Hokage, and eternal rival of Might Guy. He has silver gravity-defying hair, 2 black eyes, and a mask covering up half of his face. He wore a dark gray long-sleeve shirt with a green armored vest on top, dark gray pants and black shinobi sandals. There has been no sign of him. A resistance member informed sadly. What are you talking about? I'm right here, Naruto said calmly from the shadows. His voice sounded calm, but there was a hint of something else in there. Naruto, you're back, Kakashi said happily, but then his eyes narrowed. Why is Naruto hiding in the shadows? Of course, I am. I just got back from my youthful mission, he said energetically, which caused everyone in the resistance room to freeze. Even now Naruto is trying to fight the overflowing youthful energy pouring through him, but it is difficult. What did you just say? Kakashi asked dreadfully. He heard the forbidden word, a word everyone knows not to say. Their most loyal companion saying that word brought fear to the legendary shinobi's heart. Naruto stepped out of the shadows dressed in his diseased clothes. His once bright sapphire blue eyes are dull, lifeless and didn't match his disturbing smile plastered on his face. I'm sorry Kakashi-sensei, but I can't contain the youth. It's too strong, so youthful. Naruto's voice wavered from energetically to pleadingly. What happened to you? Kakashi said sadly. Our youthful originator found us and bathed us in his inferno of youth. Naruto shouted cheerfully, still not matching his dull eyes. Damn you guy? Kakashi cursed. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto called out. Yeah, Naruto? Kakashi said solemnly. Would you do me a favor? Naruto asked. What do you need, Naruto? Kakashi asked, assuming he wanted him to end his youthful existence. Naruto, to be able to resist the disease for so long, showed his incredible will. Will you help me by joining me? Become one with my youthful comrades and bask in my eternal glory. Naruto called out youthfully, finally being consumed by the disease. That is the day the resistance ended, and the world fell under the youthful energies. Small pockets of resistance tried to fight back but were quickly overcome with youth. Might Guy and Kakashi could be seen running youthfully around Konoha in green spandex on their hands with tons of boulders on their back screaming youth. The screen faded to black. That is not a happy ending. Naruto called out, clearly shaken by his youthful persona. He thought that he was going to be able to fight the disease and overcome its power. Yet, even he still fell under its spell. Just goes to show you, not every life you live has a good ending. Kami replied. It is still better than the last one at least. Naruto stated. Still on about you and Sasuke? The lowly goddess said tiredly. Yes. Her fellow blonde answered immediately. Whatever. Ready for the next scene? Kami asked. Yeah, I'm curious to see what else I've lived through, or haven't lived through. Naruto answered truthfully, turning back to the television. Just as Kami and Naruto are about to start watching another reality, Naruto heard footsteps behind him. This confused the blonde boy greatly as he had assumed it was only him and the lowly goddess. He turned around and his jaw hung open as he stared blankly ahead. It is a man that he knew very well. He is fair-skinned with wild spiky black hair covering the right side of his face, one black eye visible. He wore a loose black t-shirt and baggy gray sweatpants and is barefoot. The man in front of him walking away carrying a bag of chips is Madara Uchiha. Madara, Naruto shouted in panic. He immediately jumped to his feet and glared fiercely at the man in front of him who strangely just looked at him lazily. It wasn't exactly what he imagined his next encounter with the man would be like. Yo, the elder Uchiha waved lazily at the blonde boy. Normally he would have challenged him to a dance of death, but he really wanted to eat more of these delicious chips. Never mind the fact that they are both dead. Naruto stared dumbfounded at the great evil known as Madara Uchiha. The man who ruined his life and killed many of his loved ones just shrugged him off like he didn't matter. That greeting also freaked him out slightly. Did Kakashi somehow corrupt the Uchiha? He thought worriedly, looking over the Uchiha for an orange book of some sort. Luckily, he didn't see the porn anywhere on his body. "Hey Mata-chan, how is Yami-chan treating you?" the blonde goddess asked, her words laced with mirth as she waved at the Uchiha. The Uchiha grunted at how the damn loli said his name. "She is fine, and very interested in reading different versions of my life. I find her odd," the elder Uchiha admitted. "Wait, you have different versions of your life too?" Naruto shouted in shock. He thought he would be the only one, as he thought it is rare. Apparently, it isn't as rare as he thought. "What of it, boy?" Madara grunted. He looked down at his hands and stared at the beautiful bag of chips. Growing up, he never has been a person who enjoyed junk food, but dying twice changes things. Plus, that damn goddess Yami force fed him bags upon bags of junk food and told him to get the metaphorical stick out of his ass. She is surprisingly persuasive. Naruto was about to respond to the rude comment, but someone else beat him to it. "Mata-kun, where are you? You're not trying to hide from me again, are you? Do we need to have another talk?" A candy-sweet voice called out from a hallway Madara had been walking towards before being interrupted by him. Madara's eyes opened in fear, not that he would ever admit that. Her talks were disturbing. He could still feel the rough ropes that bound him to the chair. He shivered unconsciously before responding to the she-devil. "I am just grabbing chips, Yami. I'm coming back right now." Madara called out loudly with a slight shakiness in his voice. He sent a lazy glare at the pest that ruined his plans and scurried out of the room, leaving a dumbstruck blonde boy and amused goddess. "What just happened?" Naruto asked, dumbly staring off towards the hallway. "Yami took a great interest in Mata-chan, and she has been training him," the lowly goddess said, trying to stifle her laughter. Naruto sat back down on the couch and nodded dumbly. This other goddess is training the Madara Uchiha like a puppy. If the idea didn't sound so ridiculous, he probably would have burst out laughing at the thought. Shaking his head to clear away his thoughts, he looked over to the smiling girl beside him. "I guess we should continue where we left off?" Naruto asked, trying to ignore the previous scene. "Indeed," she said, agreeing with her fellow blonde. She turned back to the television and clicked the remote. The screen changed from black to a strange scene. Naruto Uzumaki stood dumbfounded in front of the Shinobi and Civilian Council. He is still wearing his newly patched up bright orange jumpsuit with bandages across his face and arms. His sapphire blue eyes are filled with so much disbelief at what he is hearing. "They couldn't do this just for completing the mission I was assigned, right?" he thought wildly. "And that's why from this point on, you shall be exiled from the village and not allowed to return, or you shall face execution. You will not be allowed in any of our allies' territory, or you will be detained and face execution. Your chakra will be sealed so you can't harm any of our allies," an old counselor woman stated coldly, sneering at the blonde in front of her. "Exiled from the village, execution for returning, chakra will be sealed." Naruto stared at the screen in disbelief. "I got exiled from the village for completing my mission objective. I know the villagers hated me, but they never went this far," he thought sadly. He couldn't believe something like this is happening to his counterpart. He wondered, though, what mission caused this. The current Hokage is currently shaking in visible anger as she listened to her advisors and council rattle on. "Do you honestly believe I'm going to allow you to exile one of our most loyal shinobi just because he completed his mission?" The Godem Hokage shouted in anger. An elderly man wrapped in bandage with one eye visible decided to comment on that. "You're too emotional, entwined with the culprit, and couldn't trust you to do what is right for the village. We went to the daimyo, and he agreed with our choice. You've been overruled, Tsunade-san." The old war hawk smirked internally, watching the Hokage glower with anger. "I don't understand what the pup did wrong. He brought back a traitor that almost got my son killed," a member of the Shinobi Council snarled out. "Troublesome, I agree. Uzumaki-san has done nothing wrong to warrant such an action," an older pineapple-haired Shinobi Council member commented lazily. "What you're doing to this child is cruel," a big-boned member of the Shinobi Council commented with his arms crossed. "It's nice to know you have some people that at least decided to stick up for you," Kami said idly as she continued to watch the scene unfold in front of her. Though she did see Naruto from the corner of her eye, he looked disappointed. "They're talking about Sasuke's retrieval mission, I think," Naruto said absently as he stared at the council on the screen. He failed to bring Sasuke back and ended up in the hospital for a while before being allowed back on active duty. If he had succeeded, would they really have used that as an excuse to banish him? Why? Naruto said lowly, almost a whisper. His hair shadowed his eyes as he stared at the ground. He is confused, disappointed, angry, and hurt. His emotions are going haywire with everything he heard. What did you say? Speak up, boy. A merchant on the civilian council demanded. Why are you banishing me for bringing back Sasuke? I did everything to bring him back, so why? Naruto said shakily, his entire stature trembled with unknown emotions. Brought him back? You might as well have brought him back in a body bag, you damn demon. An elderly woman on the civilian council shouted angry. That is all Naruto needed to hear to understand the true reason behind his exile, his unjust banishment. It wasn't because he brought Sasuke back barely holding on to life. It is all because he held the Kyuubi, the demon kitsune that garnished so much hatred before being sealed inside him. So that's why you're doing this, he voiced his thoughts lowly. The council room quieted and stared at the blonde child. He stopped trembling and looked up at them with a blank expression, his eyes a dull cold blue. Everyone had to suppress the shiver his tundric cold eyes sent out. It's not because of Sasuke, it's because the Kyuubi. Something I have no control over, he said with a sharp edge. That is just another reason to get you out of the village. With this criminal organization after you, it's safer for the village if you're not here. The Warhawk said coldly. Internally, he is pleased with this outcome. If he can't control the weapon, he'll get rid of it. So, if I didn't have the Kyuubi sealed inside me, I wouldn't be banished? Naruto said sharply, though his eyes have an unusual glint in them. He has a terrible idea, but he could care less with the outcome anymore. If the village wanted to abandon him, he would fix their mistake. I believe you're about to do something stupid. The lowly goddess commented, looking over to the blonde next to her. He has a look of concentration, like he is trying to figure out his other's plan. His eyes widened in shock. I think I know what I'm about to do, Naruto said with a gasp. If his other is about to do what he thinks, then pray to Kami that she watches over everyone's poor soul. Kami's eyes narrowed, but then turned back to the television to see what is about to happen. Naruto decided not to elaborate, so she would just have to watch to figure out. It is most likely stupid though. Naruto closed his eyes, then reopened them in front of a mighty steel gate with a ceiling tag stuck in the center. Behind the gate is endless darkness and one lone eye the size of Naruto himself. Its crimson-slitted eyes stared back into the icy cold blue eyes. Kyuubi, how would you like your freedom? Naruto asked. Oh? Did the village hurt your feelings so bad that you want me to crush them for you? Or perhaps you hope that if I'm not sealed inside you anymore, they will let you stay? The Kyuubi patronized the blonde boy in front of it. Naruto decided to ignore the taunts and continue his proposition. You're the most powerful existence in the world. You don't deserve to be trapped behind a cage. However, it's always been my duty to keep you locked up to protect the villagers from your wrath. Humanity is cruel, and I wonder to myself, why do I protect humans when they don't even see me as a human? Naruto stated, garnishing the full attention of the nine-tailed kitsune. Naruto, seeing that he has the full attention of the fox, continued, if I free you, could you take me with you? If I die in the process, could you take my body and bury it somewhere nice? I imagine the villagers will not give me the same courtesy, he said calmly. The Kyuubi stared at the blonde-haired boy for a few minutes, thinking over his words. Freedom is right in his grasp, and all the boy wanted is to be buried somewhere nice. The kitsune could easily do that, but taking the child with him and raising it in his image sounded interesting as well. What would you do, father? The kitsune thought. A few more minutes passed pondering before he decided. I accept your offer, human. I will take you with me. Your body will be weak though when you free me and will experience pain like nothing before. The Kyuubi stated with narrowed eyes. I understand, Kyuubi. Naruto said, when I release the seal, could you wait and let me speak once more with the council? He asked politely. The idea of Naruto asking politely would have worried anyone, and instantly assume he planned a prank like no other. Fine, but be quick, the Kyuubi barked out. Kami stared at Naruto in surprise. She didn't expect Naruto to free the Kyuubi on his own people, but it appears this Naruto lost hope in humanity. Such a shame to see such a pure soul shatter like that. Naruto walked over to the gate and put his hand on the large gate. The water below him raised him up to the seal above him, and he slowly reached his hand out to the seal. There is no going back from this once he did it. Steeling his resolve, the grasped the paper and pulled hard. Ah, I remember this part. Happened completely differently, but here comes my father. Naruto said with a hint of excitement at seeing his dad again. Naruto's hand stopped abruptly as a man that looked very much like him grabbed his hand. He pushed him backwards into the water and jumped down in front of him. What the hell? Naruto said in shock. Kyuubi, I don't know what you did to my son to make him want to free you, but I won't allow it. The new man said coldly, leveling his glare at the kitsune trapped behind the steel gate. The Kyuubi snarled at the man, before snorting. Yondaime, I didn't trick the boy at all. He came to me on his own free will to release me. The kitsune said condescendingly. The Yondaime's eyes narrowed at that statement and turned around to stare at the blonde boy laying in the water staring at him. Is that true, Naruto? He asked seriously. How do you know my name? Naruto asked in shock. His hero stood in front of him, and somehow knew his name. He said you were his son earlier, shouldn't be that shocking. Kami said, rolling her eyes. I was kind of shocked, and my hero was standing in front of me. Forgive me for not hearing the word son. Naruto responded dryly. That's 'cause you're my precious son, Naruto. The taller blonde man said in a sweet and sincere tone. Wait for it, Naruto said with mirth, his eyes dancing in amusement. The man sealed his fate, pun not intended, when he mentioned he is his father. His son got up and walked over to him. He opened his arms up expecting a warm father-son hug. He sadly, much to his displeasure, received a very powerful punch to the gut that he folded in two. Naruto broke out into laughter seeing his father get sucker punched in the gut again. What did the man expect? He sealed the Kyuubi inside of him, forcing him to suffer at the hands of the villagers for his entire childhood? Apparently, he expected instant forgiveness and love. Kami herself started to chuckle at the man as he got punched in the stomach. From what she could tell, Naruto is most definitely a mama's boy. Never in any of the futures she has seen where Kushina and Naruto meet for the first time has she been punched in the gut. She is always welcomed with that warm heartfelt hug that Minato desired. Poor Minato. Naruto's father fell backwards and coughed. I deserve that. He said with a chuckle. Why? He said lowly, shaking silently before glaring at his father. Why did you seal the Kyuubi inside of me? My life has been hell because of you. The villagers treat me like a monster. Shops won't let me buy anything unless it's overcharged to the point where I can't even afford it. I was sabotaged throughout my entire time in the academy. Everyone ignored me when I begged for help. It's all your fault. Naruto shouted at the man, tears sliding down his whiskered cheeks. I did it to protect the village and because I knew you could handle the burden. The village was supposed to see you as a hero, not a monster. The Yondaime said sadly. Why are you trying to free the Kyuubi? He asked carefully. He chuckled darkly at the thought of him being treated like a hero. The village is banishing me because I hold the Kyuubi. They plan on sealing away my chakra and throwing me to the wolves. He said with a glare. Minato, the fourth Hokage, stared at his son in shock. His dying wish to see his son as a hero was ignored blatantly, and worse, they are banishing him from the village for something he has no control over? He could tell his body was rolling in his grave at this moment. At least he understood why he is going to release the Kyuubi on those ungrateful bastards. I understand, Minato said with a slight stutter. The village didn't deserve his protection. The Kyuubi has promised to take me with him, or at least bury me somewhere nice. Naruto said to his father before he thought of something. Looking back towards the Kyuubi, could you spare my precious people? You know who they are. Naruto asked kindly, bowing his head towards the massive beast. The current Hokage and her apprentice, that teacher from the academy, and the ramen family, correct? The Kyuubi asked, receiving a nod. Fine, I will attempt to not squish them. The kitsune said seriously. Naruto, I want you to know. No matter what, I'm always proud of you and love you greatly. My time here is up, I'll miss you, son. The Yondaime said lovingly before vanishing out of existence, leaving Naruto and the Kyuubi alone. I didn't expect him to allow me to do this, and I'm happy he loves me even after my decision. Naruto said happily, a few tears gathering in his eyes as he stared at the screen. He truly has an amazing father. Naruto went through the same process and ripped the seal off the gate, freeing the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi did as promised and sat patiently in the dark staring at the blonde. Naruto bowed once more before disappearing from the seal and back into the real world. While for him, he had been in there for almost an hour, only a few seconds had passed for him. He looked over to the current Hokage who stared at him with worry. "Ba-chan, thank you for trying," he said before looking towards the council who sat staring or mostly glaring at him. "Then I shall no longer hold the Kyuubi. If me holding it has caused me so many problems, then I refuse to hold it any longer," Naruto stated coldly, causing the room to tense up. "What do you mean, Naruto?" Tsunade asked Naruto with wide eyes. "I mean, I just freed the Kyuubi from the seal," he stated to the council. "Sorry Ba-chan, might want to find cover," Naruto said sadly. Just as he finished saying that, a red aura started flooding out of Naruto. Unlike how it usually covers his body, this fell to the floor like a mist. The heavy feeling of malice filled the air, causing everyone to freeze in place and stare at the event happening in front of them. The next moment, sounds of fight and shouting filled Naruto's ears. However, the blonde is in far too much pain to pay attention. He collapsed, but instead of falling onto the cold council floor, he landed on the softest patch of fur. His eyes drifted into darkness as unconsciousness took over. The village hidden in the leaves lost a lot of shinobi that day, and most of the village was destroyed once more. The Kyuubi vanished from the face of the elemental nations and Naruto's body was never found or recovered. "I wonder if I died, or the Kurama kept me alive," Naruto wondered out loud. "I bet you're still alive. The Kyuubi took interest in raising you in his image after all." Kami voiced her opinion. "I bet this put a dent in the Akatsuki's plan." He chuckled at the thought of them searching for him but never finding him. They would never have expected him to release the 9 tails. Kami couldn't help but agree with that statement. From the sounds of it, Kurama took Naruto out of the elemental nations altogether. She shook her head in amusement. "What did you think?" the blonde lowly asked. Naruto thought over her question for a moment. "I'm shocked that they would banish me for retrieving Sasuke, and while I'm disappointed in my counterpart's decision, I can't fault him for it," he said seriously. "I see, are you ready for the next scene then?" she asked her fellow blonde. "Ready as I'll ever be," Naruto said, giving her a thumbs up. The blonde shinobi blinked, and his eyes came back into focus before narrowing in confusion. He stared at the blank television for a second before stealing a glance at the goddess who was still staring blankly at the same screen. He raised his hand in front of his face and clenched and unclenched it as if testing if it was real. Paranoia swept across him quickly as his eyes darted side to side. He quickly grabbed a hold of the goddess's shoulder and shook it softly. Did you feel that?" he asked nervously. The blonde lowly blinked at the sudden shaking and glanced at her charge. She registered his question and stared at him blankly for a few moments. "I have literally zero idea what you're talking about," she admitted with a raised eyebrow and simple shrug of the shoulders. She hadn't felt a thing after they just finished the last scene. Naruto balked at her. "Really?" he exclaimed. Getting another blank stare in return, his shoulders sagged. "I felt like we've been staring off into space for over a year," he informed with a small shiver creeping up his spine. The blank stare continued for a bit before amusement started dancing in her sky-blue eyes. "That's honestly one of the silliest things I've ever heard," she choked out a laugh, not even bothering to hide her own amusement at his statement. After seeing his eyebrow twitch slightly in annoyance but still holding on to his paranoia, she decided to humor him. "I'm a goddess, Naruto. I'm confident that I would notice if I was staring off into space for over a year," she pointed out with a hint of arrogance lacing her tone. He felt conflicted as he still felt like something had happened. "Are you sure?" he asked unsurely and got a lazy nod in return. He sighed. "All right, you're probably right," he stated with an uneasy nod. "So, what are we watching next?" he asked, tilting his head to the side. She turned back toward the screen and pressed some buttons on her remote while humming softly. "Let's go with this one and see what it's about. This is one of the newer branches added to your tree," she chirped, her feet swinging back and forth. With a few clicks, the screen came to life and they both sat eagerly to see what happened next. Naruto was just so tired. A build-up that started since he was at the beginning of his youth. A short life filled with misery, people being cruel to him for no other reason than existing. At least, he could never figure out a reason other than that. He remembered when he lived at the orphanage, Before they kicked him out at the swell age of 4.5. He was never allowed to interact with the other children. Punishment would always follow if he tried to corrupt them, as the matron said. That woman never liked him and made sure he knew that quite clearly. She glared hatefully, slapped him for doing something everyone else did, or shut him in a corner when he smiled. His earliest memories weren't pleasant. Cammy sighed sadly at Naruto's younger life. This is the life most of the versions of her blonde companion faced. Some of them were slightly better if someone grabbed him in time, but most of the time, he was isolated or worse. She stole a glance at the blonde and saw him watching the screen intently. She turned back toward the screen to watch more. Being forced out onto the streets didn't help either. Sure, he disliked the matron greatly, but the villagers despised him on a greater scale. If he was lucky, they would sneer at him and then pretend he didn't exist. It hurt, but it was better the alternative. Otherwise, he would cover the back of his head and keep his head down to avoid the trash and other miscellaneous objects thrown his way. He'd still get hurt, but it helped slightly. Thankfully, he only lived on the streets for a week before a kind elderly man in a nice pointy hat showed up. He smiled at him, fed, clothed, and gave him his own place. He didn't even have to pay for it, it was free of charge. It wasn't amazing, honestly, it was quite small. It was his home though, and to him, it was perfect. His own sanctuary from the glares and hurtful words. It really was a great place, Naruto suddenly said while not taking his eyes off the smaller version of himself. I was so thankful to be given a home by him, he stated, remembering all the times he spent with the elderly man. He smiled as his younger self ran around his small home excitedly. He missed his place after it was destroyed during Pain's attack. As the years progressed, nothing changed. He had hoped when he joined the academy at the prime age of 6, he would make friends. How naive he was. The adults that despised him informed all the kids to avoid him. The children did as they were told and stayed away from him. The teachers felt remarkably like the orphanage matron. They either ignored him or punished him for things that weren't his fault. It hurt but wouldn't show it. He made sure to smile since the nice old man always told him to. A friendly face brings friends, he said, or at least, something like that. So far, it wasn't showing any results. Your Hokage has always appeared to be surprisingly naive. It's obvious that the source of their hatred smiling constantly would only anger them more, she commented, turning her head to her fellow blonde. Naruto sighed. He tried the best he could, but he was old and held the village to highly, he stated with a slow shake of his head. As I said, naive, she rebuked, but Naruto didn't respond, so she turned back toward the screen. That brings up to now. Sitting alone in his dark, messy apartment with his knees hugged up against his chest was Naruto Uzumaki. When alone in his apartment, he had no need to fake his smile since there were no friends to attract. Dried tear tracks went down his whiskered cheeks as he sighed sadly into his knees. He wanted a friend, someone he could confide in like the other kids. Someone he could trust explicitly with his secrets or pranks. That's what he wanted, but deep down, he wished to disappear and find freedom somewhere else. There is a simple saying. Be careful what you wish for. You never know who will be listening. It came off as a warning, one that should be heeded. Well, that sounds ominous, Cammy said, cocking her head to the side. Naruto groaned into his hands. Something is about to happen to me. Cammy, why do you hate me? He said dramatically, looking over at said goddess. She did not look impressed. I don't hate you. Fate just likes to play with you, she informed with a simple shrug. Naruto suddenly felt like something hard slammed into his head and he blinked in shock. Knew it. He turned around quickly, prepared to defend himself, but he only saw his bland wall. Now he's just confused as he rubbed the back of his head painfully. Okay, what the hell just hit me? He asked out loud in confusion, but no one answered. He turned around to face his room and blinked a few more times for good measure. Wait, what? He asked no one in particular. The reason for his confusion? It was daytime, the moonlight that previously was shining in was now a warm day streak. The confusion increased with the look of his home. His room was clean, spotless even. His bed was finely made, his shelves dusted and the floor cleaner than he could ever recall. He stood up and walked to the middle of his room and rubbed the back of his head. That's when he noticed another detail. He was no longer dressed in his neon orange jumpsuit that he was wearing only a moment ago. Instead, he was wearing a simple white short-sleeved shirt with a red swirl centered in the middle of his chest. Under that he wore a black long-sleeved shirt and simple cargo shorts. It was his old outfit that he loved before he outgrew it. Just another thing to add to his confusion. Did someone break into my home, clean up my home and give me fresh clothes? Naruto asked with a deadpan expression. It, would seem so. The nicest break-in I've ever seen, she chuckled awkwardly. Do you like it? A melodious voice asked from behind him. He jolted and quickly shot around and spotted the source. A girl that looked around his age and remarkably familiar. She has golden blonde hair much like his own that disappeared behind her shoulders. A soft face with dazzlingly sapphire blue eyes. However, a feature that caught his eyes was the familiar birthmarks on her cheeks. Birthmarks that he also adorned on his cheeks. She wore a black short-sleeved jacket which was zipped up to just above her chest. Underneath, she wore a burnt orange shirt which was only just longer than her jacket at the sleeves. Dark gray pants that ended just above her ankles and her feet were bare. She was one of the prettiest girls he had ever seen. Naruto's head slowly leaned to the side as he studied the girl in front of him. She looked remarkably similar to him and his Naruko form as he dubbed it. I wonder who that is, he said idly out loud. Well, from the appearance, I would hazard a guess at it being a relative of some sort. Most likely a sister if I had to guess, she responded while glancing her over. She agreed with the younger Naruto, she was a pretty girl. A sister? Naruto choked out. Oh, yeah, you have a sister more often than you think. Most of the time you both love each other since no one else would. Though, sometimes that love sprouts up. She paused as she blushed lightly, differently, she finished with a slight giggle. What does that mean? I'm sure you'll find out eventually. Who are you? He asked even more confused than he originally thought possible. I made sure to clean up your room and give you some fresh clothes while you slept on the floor. I don't know how you can sleep like that, but I won't judge if you find it comfortable. Though, I can't imagine it's good for your back, she stated, tilting her head to the side cutely while ignoring his question. Naruto's eye twitched while Kami hummed in agreement. She's right, you shouldn't sleep like that. It's really not good for your back, she stated with amusement. Her eyes locked onto his own and an unknown emotion swelled within them. Do you know how long I've waited to meet you? She asked in an almost desperate tone. No, he answered unsure how to respond to that. Smooth, the loli commented. Hey, I'm really confused right now, ya know. Some girl I don't know breaks into my home, cleans it, me and then tells me she's been waiting to meet me. Not to mention how similar she looks like me. I'm probably short-circuiting right now. I bet you'd be just as confused as me. Naruto argued. No. The blonde teen's eye twitched as she referenced his younger version's awkward answer. Then, something clicked in his head. His sapphire blue eyes widened in realization as he crouched slightly and rudely thrust his finger at her. You should at least take her out to dinner first before you thrust at her, she suddenly said cheekily. Naruto's cheeks dusted red. You know that's not what it meant, Arrow Kami, he replied in exasperation. She smirked at her new nickname but did nothing about it. She would get him back later for it after all. Do I? She asked innocently. Hey, wait a damn minute. Who the hell are you and how did you get into my home? Also, why do you look like me? He shouted dramatically and only got a stifled giggle in return that he found cute. Not that he would admit that to the strange girl. She smiled angelically that gave a warm feeling in his chest. I'm Naruko Uzumaki, your sister and I've waited a very long time to meet you dearest brother, she said sweetly, holding her hand over her heart. Ah, the forbidden fruit, she whispered to herself while giggling perversely getting a disturbed look from Naruto. Naruto stumbled slightly at that answer and his mind raced. As the realization of what she said started to solidify in his mind, he had to blink back a few tears at the thought of family. Sister? He tested the word getting a happy nod from the girl. I don't have a sister, he choked out in a guarded tone. You do, I promise, she replied instantly. The Hokage, she spat out harshly, kept us apart for so long. He helped build a wall between you and me without you even realizing I was there. I never stopped trying to get past it though. I pushed and pushed until I finally found a way out, she said with tears, but an angry expression filtered over her. They never wanted us to be together. This village wanted us to stay apart so we would both suffer alone. She growled out before suddenly switching back to a loving smile. "Now I'm here and I'm here to stay," she said softly. "I know it's not true, but I had to ask. I didn't have a sibling kept away from me in my life, right?" His voice gaining a sharp edge at the thought of someone keeping family from him. If it was true, he didn't know what he would do. The goddess shook her head. "No, you were an only child," she informed while patting him gently on the back. His eyes widened further as he felt something deep stir within him trying to push its way out. He clenched his hands and willed it back as he stumbled back onto his bed and sat down in shock. Had the Hokage really kept his only family away from him this whole time? Did the village really want him to suffer that badly? Why? He couldn't understand any reason for doing that. Where have you been?" he asked, his voice filled with a variation of emotions. "I've been locked away in a damp sewer since the day I was born. Every day I struggled to stay warm, but the water was always so cold. It was always so dark and lonely." She whispered the last part before looking up with hopeful eyes. "I persevered though, just so I could see you," she said with a beautiful, welcoming smile as she opened her arms as if to embrace him. Naruto felt a wave of anger build up within him at the idea of what his other sister went through. Kami, on the other hand, focused on another aspect of what she said. Why was she locked away in a sewer? She thought curiously. She felt bad for the girl, but something was strange about this situation. Naruto felt his anger spike to untold levels. They made his family, his sister, live in a sewer. He always thought his life was bad, but at least he was given an apartment. A pang of guilt was felt at the thought of him living comfortably for so long while his sister suffered. His sister had it so much worse. "I am sorry," he said quietly, tears welling up in his eyes. "I'm so sorry for not helping you. I didn't know," he choked out, fresh tears sliding down his cheek. "It's okay, I promise. I've waited for this moment my whole life," she stated so sincerely that his guilt increased. Much like his younger version, he too felt a pang of guilt. She walked closer and gently squeezed him on the shoulder and looked into his tear-filled eyes. She smiled warmly at him and sat down beside him. She leaned onto his shoulder and closed her eyes and held a gentle smile. Naruto glanced down at his lap, tear marks staining his shorts. What did they do now? Could they stay in Konoha now? No, they would just lock up his sister again or worse. He wouldn't allow that. He would never allow his family to be taken from him again. Righteous anger filled his entire being before it deflated. How many people knew that he had a sister locked away? Did they just jokingly be nice to him to play with him? He didn't know what to do. "What do we do now?" he asked in a broken whisper. "I can't even imagine what he's going through right now," Naruto said softly. "When Sasuke tried to break our bond, it hurt. To suddenly have every bond in the village severed at once." He trailed off, staring at the younger version of himself in pity. The loli softly rubbed his back in a comforting manner. She opened her eyes with a spark of something hidden within. "We leave this village behind and head as far west as we can. Let's abandon the shinobi world and live as a family. We have so much time to make up that they stole from us," she stated clearly. Naruto froze for a few seconds. Could he really abandon the shinobi world? He glanced at his sister leaning against him and instinctively knew the answer to his own question. His shoulder sagged down. "All right, we'll leave," he agreed with determination, knowing that it was for the best. She suddenly pulled him into a surprisingly strong hug and he felt lightheaded. "I ship it," Kami said with a giggle. Naruto turned and gave her a deadpan stare. "We're siblings, it's not like that," he stated blandly. Sometimes he didn't understand this child goddess. "You said the same thing about Sasuke," she said in a sing-song tone. When she saw her fellow blonde turn green in the cheeks, she smirked. "So, you never know," she chirped. "Thank you," she said happily, holding him tightly. She let go after a bit and pushed her forehead against his and stared into his eyes. "This is going to be a weird question, but can I be the leader? Will you trust me to keep us both alive?" she asked, her breath touching his lips. "Ooh la la," she said while bumping a shoulder against the teen. This was looking more and more like a world where Naruto gave into the forbidden fruit. Another world to add to her collection. Naruto rolled his eyes. He agreed, that was a weird question, but he didn't mind her being in charge. In a short amount of time that they had known one another, he already trusted her. It felt weird to give his trust so easily, but this was family. If he knew one thing about family, you trusted them above all others. Not all the time, the goddess responded. Yes, he answered after a bit. Her smile grew larger and she kissed him softly. He felt something in the back of his mind swell up before his eyes went dull and mind blank. She pulled back and gently rubbed his cheek until they slowly regained their life. Something felt different to him, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Something significant just happened, and I'm not sure what, the lowly goddess said looking at the screen. Everything about this situation has felt strange, and the effect of that kiss only adds to it, she said, turning to look at the blonde who was also trying to figure it out. Was she dangerous, and they really locked her up for that? I think it has something to do with those two questions, he said, rubbing his chin. She stood up and with her hand holding his. Let's get out of here, I'm ready to be free, she said eagerly, pulling him toward the front door of his apartment. While he stared at the back of her head, his hand in hers, he couldn't see his sister's face. If he could, he would have seen her victorious smile adorning her face, her one sapphire blue eyes now a deep ruby red. Wait, she was locked away in a sewer. She might be the Kyuubi, Cammy said thoughtfully, a little worried on what she had won. How could the Kyuubi get out of the seal in the first place? She felt like she was still missing a piece of the puzzle. No, I don't think it's the Kyuubi, he responded, shaking his head in the negative. Look at her eyes, they aren't slit, he pointed out just as the now ruby red-eyed girl opened the front door of the apartment. He was a little lost on what was happening. Alright. It suddenly flashed back to Naruto sitting in his apartment alone, back against the wall, hugging his knees. The apartment was a mess. The moonlight breached the window, illuminating the room in a soft blue hue. He suddenly straightened, his eyes closed. He clenched his fists as if testing them for the first time before slowly raising his head to look ahead. His eyes opened, but they no longer held their radiant sapphire blue. Glowing, blood-red rubies stared into the darkness, and a smirk crept its way onto his face. Free, he said softly. Don't worry, little light, I won't let you suffer anymore. We'll be together in our perfect dream forever, he whispered to himself before a soft chuckle escaped his lips. Slowly, the volume picked up and throughout the village, the villagers suddenly felt restless. The people of the elemental nations felt a shiver crawl up their spine. Something was released into the world and changes were coming. As the saying goes, be careful what you wish for. You never know who will be listening. I understand now. She's my inner darkness, Naruto commented as the screen turned off. So, in that world, his darkness took over so he could live within his dreams with his sister forever. He didn't know how he felt about that. It felt too much like Madara's plan. Cammy nodded her head in agreement as all the pieces finally lined up. The Hokage told you to constantly smile so you hid your negative emotions. I believe that's the wall she was talking about. She was born in your mindscape, so she was trapped in the dark, damp sewer her entire life. Those questions must have been a way to wrangle control from you without fighting for it, she commented. That made sense to her. She didn't really lie to me either, mostly just half-truths, he said, leaning back on the couch. The goddess hummed in agreement. She played the game very well and won. It looks like that world is getting a darker version of you, she said, getting a hum of agreement from her fellow blonde. We may come back to this world in the future to see what happens. That okay with you? She asked curiously. That's fine, I guess. I'm curious as well, ya know? He replied. Naruto leaned back on the couch and stared up at the ceiling. He has been put in a unique situation. Being allowed to see different versions of his own life is interesting, to say the least. Little differences that somehow lead to large changes. He had heard someone talk about something like this before. The butterfly change? No, that didn't sound quite right, but it's close. Something as small as crushing a butterfly could cause the end of the world. That's what watching these other lives were like. Cammy saw the blonde teen in deep thought and swiveled toward him. She crossed her legs and rested your elbows on her knees with her hands resting under her jaw. What you thinking about? She asked curiously. Sapphire blue eyes shifted toward the lowly and the back up to the ceiling. Thinking about all my others, ya know? He responded after a few moments. He shifted slightly and felt a tug in his stomach. I could really use some ramen right now, he thought hungrily. As if heard by the delectable salty gods themselves, the empty ramen bowl on the table filled with fresh ramen. The smell filtered through his nose and stars appeared in his eyes. Thank you, ramen gods. He thanked the divine and quickly started to eat. While noodles were slurped down, Cammy glared at the ramen. Why does he keep asking these false ones for ramen? How are they even able to respond? This doesn't make sense, and why am I feeling jealous? She questioned herself before a challenging smile replaced her glare. She snapped her fingers and an extra-large bowl of steaming miso pork ramen, extra pork, appeared on the table. Naruto, I made this bowl especially for you, she said with a heavenly tone. Naruto stopped slurping at his ramen and gazed longingly at the much larger bowl of ramen. His eyes slowly shifted back to his current bowl and he quickly inhaled it, not seeing the shadow of a frown on Cammy's face. When the bowl emptied, he tentatively reached over to the massive bowls as if it was a holy relic. He noticed 2 finely crafted black chopsticks with his name in burnt orange written elegantly on them. He took a small mouthful of the ramen and felt the pork melt in his mouth. Ramen truly made by the divine. This finally proved it, Cammy was the real deal. Thank you, Cammy. This is the most delicious ramen I've ever had, he chirped, flashing her one of his brilliant warm smiles, his sapphire blue eyes sparkling with joy. Victory flashed in her eyes as the blonde teen went back to savoring her ramen. Take that, false ones, she mentally yelled out as she felt the empty bowl glare at her. That's right, he's mine, she declared possessively before turning her eyes to the blonde teen. You're welcome, Naruto, she replied beautifully with a slight hint of arrogance. A few minutes passed and Naruto finished the divine ramen. He leaned back with an exaggerated sigh as he rubbed his stomach. That was amazing, he said out loud, smiling in contentment. Glad you enjoyed, and if you want more, please make sure to ask me, she stated, clearly getting an eager nod in return. Cammy. 1, false. 0, she thought happily, a cartoon version of herself clapping and cheering excitedly. She shook her head slightly before picking up the remote and shifting through some versions until she settled on 1. Ready? She asked, her finger hovering over the play button. Yup, he answered, his mind now promptly settled from his earlier thinking. Naruto jumped building to building while avoiding the 2 random shinobi on his tail. He laughed exuberantly with a large grin plastered on his face. He quickly pulled out a cloth that would camouflage him with the background and hid behind it. Man, I sure hope none of these shinobi can see through a basic stealth trick like this, he thought from behind the cloth. After all, it would be embarrassing. Oh, I remember this. This is right after I pulled one of my greatest pranks. Naruto laughed, clapping his hands as if rooting his other on. The 2 shinobi landed right in front of the hidden kid. Where did that brat go? The first Chunin said to his teammate. I don't know, but maybe he's behind that suspicious cloth billowing in the wind, the second Chunin replied, causing the blonde academy student to start sweating lightly. The first Chunin stared at his comrade blankly before turning to the billowing cloth, then quickly back at his teammate. What are you, an idiot? Of course, he's not behind that incredibly suspicious cloth, he retorted, smacking the other on the back of the head for even suggesting something so stupid. Now, let's choose a random direction and hope we stumble upon him, he said, jumping in a random direction, mumbling about stupid teammates. Cammy palmed her face at the stupidity. It's surprising that your village is considered to be the strongest when you have such incompetent shinobi, she said to her fellow blonde. The elite in our village makes up for the bad, he replied with a simple wave of the hand. She opened her mouth to retort but decided against and returned to the screen. Well, that doesn't seem like a dumb idea at all, he shouted out after his friend, following quickly behind. Cammy sighed. Naruto blinked and sighed in relief before dropping the cloth and giving a charming thumbs up to no one in particular. Aha, I knew my unnatural luck would save me. I'm sure that nothing could go wrong now. Famous last words, Naruto and Cammy said at the same time. I mean, it's not like a school teacher is going to sneak up behind me when he should be teaching the other students, Naruto stated out loud, nodding his head wisely as it sounded quite logical. Then he felt someone tap his shoulder. He turned around lazily to see a schoolteacher who should be teaching instead of chasing him. Huh, you know, I never thought about it that way, Naruto said to himself, rubbing the bottom of his chin. I found you, Naruto. You should be in class learning to be a shinobi, not pranking the village. The schoolteacher known as Uruka reprimanded heatedly. Shouldn't you be in class teaching your students? Naruto responded with a deadpan expression. Probably. Fair enough. He consented before asking a question that's been bothering him for a while. So, how do you keep finding me? Huh? Oh, that's easy. Plot, he answered as if that answered everything, which in some strange cosmic way, it did. Deciding that their conversation was over, he grabbed onto the boy's ear. He then started dragging him back to the academy for a special lesson. Naruto chuckled lightly at the scene. Is it just me or does everything in this world feel really comedically pointed out? He asked the lowly goddess. Yeah, it seems the entire world is mocking itself, she responded between her own giggle. Later, Naruto was now tied up comically in front of the whole class. Okay class, because Naruto decided to prank the village instead of trying to better himself as a sane person would after failing twice, you're all going to suffer. Yeah, that's right, time for a pop quiz, he said, eliciting groans and glares directed at the blonde. I want each of you to come up here and perform the henge jutsu, got it? He asked, giving them all a look that dared them to defy him. Wow, Iruka-sensei is a tad harsher in this world, Naruto whistled. Indeed, but he does have a point. You probably should have tried to pay closer attention in class instead of skipping and pranking the village. It definitely wasn't earning you any brownie points, Kami said, holding up a finger. Naruto shrugged. It didn't really matter. If I had any questions, they wouldn't be answered, or I'd get laughed at for not knowing. I once tried asking Iruka-sensei for some help, but he couldn't show special treatment and just told me to try harder, he commented with a sigh. Kami gave a minuscule frown and turned back to the screen. One by one, each of Naruto's classmates went up to perform the henge while giving equally annoyed or irritated glares at him. Soon enough, it was finally his turn after getting out of his bindings. He gave a mischievous look that if anyone would have seen would have been nervous. Naruto started to snicker since he knew what was happening. Kami knew what was coming as well and started giggling through her hand in anticipation. That look promised a prank. Pedophile finder jutsu, he shouted, turning into a young buxom blonde girl. She was nude with only faint smoke covering her most private bits. Though, it left very little to the imagination. Naruto and Kami both broke out into laughter. That's the greatest name for a jutsu ever. Naruto chortled, trying to breathe through his laughter. Maybe he would start calling his jutsu that too. Blood rushed out of Iruka's nose and launched him backward onto the floor. Every student who heard the name of the technique eyed their sensei warily while taking a careful step back. Looks like your jutsu has exposed someone, she said in a sing-song voice, getting a soft laugh in return. Iruka quickly jumped back onto his feet, his eye twitching aggressively. Though, his face was dusted red from either anger or blush as he glared at the still nude child. Naruto, he shouted, his head expanding from a possible secret amino bloodline. He's the only one that I know could have his head expand when angered. So, it's possible, Naruto commented, getting a nod from Kami. Knock off your extremely effective jutsu that exposes us perverts for who we are and do what I told you, he ordered, a vein throbbing on his forehead and hopefully, only his forehead. Okay, first off, I couldn't have said it better myself. The jutsu works exactly as intended, Naruto said proudly before turning a delicate shade of green. Secondly, gross, I did not need to know that last part, he commented with a disgusted expression. He hoped it was only on his forehead. Kami giggling perversely didn't help his case. After laughing a bit at his successful jutsu, he decided to give in to his sensei's demands. He shrugged his shoulders and did a normal henge jutsu of the third Hokage, which failed much to his classmates' amusement. How was that, Iruka-sensei? He asked, his face perfectly innocent, which made the students all laugh. Oh, how he relished their attention. Naruto remembered why he became the class clown. It was one of the easiest ways to be acknowledged. To him, it didn't matter if they were laughing at him and not with him. Now, he realizes it wasn't the attention he really wanted. Iruka sighed, you failed, but I expected you to. I just wanted the class to mock you so you would hopefully try harder to pass. Now, go sit down next to Sakura, who hates you, he said, directing the blonde at the pink-haired girl who definitely hated the blonde. Why do you have to remind me? Also, what the hell, Iruka-sensei? Naruto pouted. Honestly, I always thought you could do better than Sakura, Kami informed him. Really? Of course, you're a special person. You deserved someone equally special in my opinion, she said honestly, getting a warm smile in return. Yay! Now I can ask Sakura-chan for a date, again. He cheered while running over to sit down next to his crush. Hey, Sakura-chan. Want to go out on a date? he asked hopefully, and watch as she slowly turned toward him. No, she answered angrily and rightfully punched him in the back of the head as customs demanded. As his face went through his desk, he sighed wistfully. He loved violent women, which he probably inherited, unknowingly, got from his father. That explains a lot, Naruto said blankly as he stared at his other. His face was literally smashed through the desk. How did no one ever question her on her obscene strength? Later, Naruto gripped onto the mountain as he scrubbed tirelessly at the monument he defaced earlier. Iruka stared at his student before deciding to cheer him up with a lecture. It just seemed like the right thing to do. Why do you do this, Naruto? No one will ever accept you, he started to say before a bug flew into his throat, making him cough. Naruto just stared up at his sensei with disbelief and hurt in his eyes. What a bad time to pause, Kami laughed awkwardly. Iruka, clearing his throat, looked at his student. Sorry, bug caught in my throat, he apologized, getting an "ah" from the blonde student. Now, where was I? Oh, yeah, no one will ever accept you if you continue to anger every single person in the village with your demeaning pranks. Like, honestly, it's totally doing the opposite of what you want, he said, shaking his head at the kid. Kami turned toward her fellow blonde. You know, he's telling the truth even if he did just sound like a stuck-up teenage girl, she commented. Yeah, I know that now, he said depressingly. Naruto continued to scrub as he spoke. I decided a long time ago that even negative attention is better than nothing, he answered with a shrug before glaring up at his teacher. I mean, it's not like I have any parents to go home to for some positive reinforcement, ya know? He replied with a bitter tone. Playing the dead parent card on another person who lost his parents isn't very effective, Kami stated. Oh, excuse me, I was a child. She stated with a humorous smirk. He simply stuck out his tongue and blew her a raspberry, making her laugh to herself. Iruka frowned before an amazing idea sprung into his brain. He would make it up to the orphan universally hated by just about everything by buying him food. Look, Naruto, how about I buy you a bowl of ramen after you finish cleaning up this mess, he offered with a smile. Are you trying to cheer me up with food after humiliating me in class today and reminding me of what I don't have? He asked with a raised eyebrow. I do believe he is, the lowly goddess commented. Is it working? From how I've seen this world go so far. Probably, Naruto commented alongside Kami. Yeah, he answered nonchalantly as he started scrubbing the mountain with renewed vigor. Phew, if he would have bargained for more, I probably would have given him special training, he thought with a breath of relief at not having extra work. Wait, what? Naruto shouted in disbelief. The goddess laughed. I guess you should work on your bargaining skills, she said, playfully nudging him in the side. Later, Naruto finished his first bowl of ramen and looked at Iruka hopefully. Can I have another? He asked. Iruka looked at his student and smiled. No, let this be a lesson. Always remember to bargain, he said sagely while enjoying his own bowl of ramen. Ah, there's nothing quite like taking a student out for a late-night dinner and teaching him at the same time. It's good to be a teacher, he said to himself. Why did he have to phrase it that way? Naruto groaned. Yeah, that's pretty weird now that I think about it. Especially after your reaction from staring at my naked female body, he stated, getting disturbed looks from the two ramen chefs. Well, at least your other notices how strange that is, Kami commented. Anyways, can I try on your headband, please? He asked, setting his limited edition goggles on the counter. Wow, you clearly have your priorities in order, the lowly deadpanned. Huh, you mean this? He asked, pointing at his headband. No, I meant your other headband, he responded with a deadpan expression. Oh, well, in that case, no. Is that why you took off your goggles? He questioned with a sly smirk. Possibly. You know you can't wear this until you graduate. This headband symbolizes our allegiance to the village. I mean, you probably won't ever get one because I hold you to such high standards. You would probably be upset to know I let someone pass last year who couldn't even use chakra, he said, mumbling that last part to himself. Hey, I'll pass for sure this time. Wait, what was that last part? Nothing. You know, I probably would have been slightly resentful if I found that out, Naruto admitted. Kami gave him a knowing look. Would you have still been resentful if you got stuck with such a youthful sensei? She asked with a sly smile. Naruto shuddered at the memory of the youthful apocalypse. Please don't remind me of that. I've never seen so much youth in one place, he shivered, getting a laugh from the lowly. The next morning. Good morning class, we'll now be starting the graduation exam. The deciding factor if you can graduate or not will be on the Bunshin Jutsu, he informed, giving everyone a look that dares them to say otherwise. With every child remaining silent, he smirked to himself. Ah, it's good to be king, he thought happily. Everyone simply shrugged off their sensei, after all, who couldn't perform something as simple and useless as the Bunshin Jutsu. Meanwhile, Naruto was panicking. Oh, come on. This is super inconvenient that they just happened to choose the one jutsu I can't perform. If only they would have chosen an actual beneficial jutsu, like the henge. He thought. Naruto blinked a few times. Why did they only test us on that jutsu? I can't recall them actually testing us on the henge even after we reviewed it, he said thoughtfully, trying to think back to his exam. Kami hummed. Well, maybe Iruka did this to make sure you failed since he thought you weren't ready for the outside world, she suggested. Soon everyone went up and performed the jutsu and passed easily. Finally, it was Naruto's turn as he walked up in front of Iruka and his assistant Mizuki. Okay, Naruto, perform the Bunshin Jutsu and you pass, Iruka said, watching the academy student intently. The other teacher stared at him too, but he didn't matter yet. Does it have to be the Bunshin Jutsu? Yes, but that jutsu isn't even useful. Why not the henge? He whined. Obviously it's because I don't think you're ready to be a shinobi yet and I want to protect you from that life for as long as possible, so I'm setting you up to fail, he answered bluntly. Told you, Kami said. Yeah? Oh, that makes sense, but I'm not happy about it, the blonde responded before preparing to perform the useless jutsu. Bunshin Jutsu, he shouted, putting all his faith into this one moment. A poof of smoke and a clone appeared, well, if you could call it that. It looked like a failed pencil sketch. Clearly, my faith is lacking, Naruto thought, a bead of sweat going down his head as he watched his twitching clone. Iruka stared at the failed clone unimpressed. Oh no, you failed a technique you've never managed to perform once. What a shocker. Iruka fake gasped. You failed, Naruto, better luck next time, he said sadly, internally proud of his masterful acting. Naruto did something he never thought he would do toward Iruka-sensei. He gave him the middle finger. He's been an asshole in this world, he said when he saw Kami give him a questioning look. Mizuki, deciding to score some easy favor, spoke up. Iruka-sensei, how about we let him pass? After all, we did let that other kid pass and he couldn't even perform. Whatever the other teacher was going to say was cut off by Iruka when he got punched into a wall and knocked unconscious. Holy shit, Naruto gaped before laughing at the traitor getting knocked out. Oh, Kami said in a deep voice before breaking down into a fit of giggles. We don't talk about that, he said, glaring fiercely at his assistant. Anyways, all your classmates were able to perform this jutsu and you couldn't. I can't in good conscience allow you to pass and enviably die in the field, he stated concisely. Can you name one person who actually uses the Bunshin Jutsu outside of the academy? Duh, there's that one ninja and that other one. Can you give me any names? Naruto deadpanned. No. The blonde sighed. Fine, well, I'm going to go watch everyone celebrate with their loving family to help build up my depression before I jump off the monument. Later, he said while walking away and waving over his shoulder. Sorry, Naruto, but it's for the best. Wait, what was that last part? He asked before shaking it off. It probably wasn't anything important. Naruto and Kami both stared at the screen with a deadpan expression. A few moments later. Hey, Mom, I passed. Can you believe it? A newly minted child soldier exclaimed happily. Wow, my little boy is growing up so fast. It won't be long until you're mentally scarred for life and have blood on your hands. Just like your father, the mother answered dreamily. They're in the trees, I'm telling you. They're in the damn tree. The father said, shaking and glancing at every tree nervously. Mom, Dad needs his meds again, the child said, shaking his mother out of her daze. He always does, she said, walking off with the man in tow. Kami started chuckling, getting a questioning look for Naruto. It's nothing, just a joke from a different world, she said, waving him off, which just confused him more. I love jokes that appear in places they should not be, she thought contently. Hey, it's that kids, a different woman said, pointing at the obviously depressed child swinging alone in the shade. Yeah, thank goodness he failed again, another woman said, standing beside her. Can you imagine how much damage he could have caused out there, or worse, he could have died? Yeah, wait, Why didn't we pass him again? Simple, it feels good to tear down the kid's dreams instead. Plus he's a demon. The woman answered like it was the most obvious thing in the world. She quickly covered the woman's mouth. Shush, you know we're not allowed to talk about that, she harshly whispered. When they looked back toward the child, he was already gone. Where? They didn't really care. Wow, she's a bitch, the blonde girl huffed. Later, Naruto sat on top of the Hokage monument while looking over the peaceful village. He was disappointed that he failed to become a shinobi for the third time. Maybe this was a sign that he should find a different path in life. Maybe he could take up painting and become a famous artist? He shook his head at the thought and sighed tiredly. Maybe I should have pushed myself harder in class instead of skipping class so often, he mumbled to himself. Well, time to take a leap of faith, he suddenly said, but as he was about to get up, someone started talking from behind him. Hey, kid, I've been looking for you. Before you take that fatal leap of faith, how about you listen to what I have to say first? I promise it'll interest you, a familiar voice said. When he turned toward the visitor, he got a good look at his other teacher, Mizuki. His was sporting a rather impressive black eye. Alright, it's not like I got anything better to do, he said with a shrug. That's the spirit, he said, clapping him on the shoulder. I've got a special offer for you, he started when Naruto started backing away immediately. He gave the blonde a confused look. Sorry, I don't roll that way. Gigi says I'm not supposed to do things like that for strangers. No matter how much I want to graduate, Naruto said seriously, hoping to protect his chastity. Cammy fell off the couch holding her stomach from laughing so hard. This is great, she choked out and looked at the blushing and clearly embarrassed Naruto. She couldn't help it and started laughing harder. Oh, shut up, he could have phrased it better, he huffed, and after a few moments, she started to calm down. Don't let him touch your, she started snickering again but pushed forward, you're no square. She choked out and started laughing more. Naruto groaned into his hands, please stop. After a few more moments of laughing, they were both sitting on the couch. One with a pleased grin plastered on her face and the other with an annoyed look. Okay, I'm good, the loli said, still sporting a grin. A look of understanding passed over Mizuki's face and his cheeks dusted pink. That's not what I meant. I have a special exam for you, he tried explaining, getting an even more wary look from the blonde. Shut it, Naruto said before she could comment. Let me start over, I have a special exam for you to do. All you need to do is recover an item, bring it to a set location and learn a technique, he stated clearly, wanting to get that misunderstanding out of the way. Naruto, who calmed down after hearing some of the details, looking thoughtfully at the teacher. You've piqued my interest, please tell me more, he asked, tilting his head to the side. He could at least hear the man out. Good, now all you need to do is break into the Hokage's office and steal the forbidden scroll of sealing and return it to me. Simple enough, right? He asked like he was asking to be handed a book off the middle shelf in a library. No, not really. I'm sure you can handle such a mediocre task. You're going to be the next Hokage after all. That is true, alright, I'll do your highly suspicious test. You can count on me. Naruto cheered, running away to plan his grand larceny. After all, it's not every day a teacher seeks out the worst student to give a special exam to steal a village treasure for an exam. Man, he sure is lucky. Naruto and Cammy both palmed their face. Wow, I can't believe that actually worked, Mizuki said, blinking a few times in shock. Later at night, Naruto, my boy, what are you doing with the forbidden scroll? The elderly Hokage asked, shocked that an academy student managed to sneak into one of the most well-guarded places in the village. Someone is getting fired for this, he thought irritably. Well, you see? Pedophile finder jutsu, he shouted, turning back into his jailbait form. It was extremely effective as the elder ninja was launched off the floor from the fountain of blood pouring from his nose. You know, I'm not sure how I feel about this. He has always taken a larger interest in me than any other kid, he said, warily staring at the man with a silly grin on his face. I'll think about it later. Time for me to graduate, he said to himself, quickly doing ninja moves to escape the tower. Okay, I'm really uncomfortable how this world keeps portraying the people that I care about, Naruto finally said. You have to admit though, it is pretty suspicious that this jutsu works on them when they know it's you, Cammy argued. Naruto crossed his arms over his chest. They're just perverts and their eyes see a young beautiful girl, he retorted. That, young beautiful girl, is you. Touché. A few moments later in the forest. Okay, now I just need to learn something from this oversized scroll, how hard can that be? 1 hour later. Wow, that was stupidly easy to learn such a complex and useful jutsu. Naruto said in shock. Sure, it had been a little rough in the beginning, but he pushed through it and managed to learn the shadow clone jutsu. He didn't know why he chose a clone technique out of all the jutsu listed, but it just felt like the right thing to do. That is impressive no matter how you look at it, Kami said, giving him an appraising look. Naruto, what have you done? An angry voice that Naruto easily recognized as Iruka said from behind him. The young teen, in a moment of brilliance or stupidity, turned toward his teacher and pointed at him. Aha, I found you, Iruka-sensei, he shouted, hoping to throw his teacher off balance. The first that collided with the top of his head gave him the conclusion that it failed. Also, he may have a concussion. I'm leaning more toward stupidity personally, Kami said with a snort. Naruto sighed, it sounded like the right thing to say. You idiot, I found you, he shouted back before taking in his appearance. He looked like he had been training for a while and couldn't help but voice his thoughts. Have you been training? He asked curiously. Yeah, and I even learned a secret technique in an hour. I'll admit, this was a strange test, but I will finally be able to graduate. Wait, say what now? I said, I'm going to be graduating. No, who gave you this test? Huh, oh, Mizuki-sensei did, why? Before Iruka could comment any further, Mizuki appeared on top of a tree branch. Ah, Naruto, you succeeded. Congratulations, now just hand me the scroll and you graduate, Mizuki said, his hand in front of him. No, don't, Naruto. He tricked you into stealing the scroll, Iruka said to Naruto. I wish I could say I'm surprised, but you're pretty gullible, he finished with a small shrug, getting a pout from Naruto. Hey, Naruto yelled in offense. Hey, Naruto yelled in offense. Yeah, what other me said. Also, I wouldn't really say tricked as I literally told him to steal the scroll, Mizuki pointed out before changing tactics. Hey, Naruto, do you want to know why the village despises you so much? He asked, throwing that metaphorical bait at the blonde. No, Mizuki, it's forbidden. Iruka shouted out, unknowingly adding to the bait. Now, wait just a moment. This sounds mildly important to me and I feel like I should hear this. What's forbidden? He asked, looking between his two teachers. Mildly important? Kami said to Naruto with a half-raised eyebrow. There is a decree created by the third Hokage himself that you are forbidden from knowing. That decree forbids us from telling you that you, Naruto, are the nine-tailed fox. You're the demon who attacked the village and killed so many innocent people. He called out dramatically, watching the blonde for the information to set in. This guy is such an idiot, the goddess said, shaking her head. Yup, Naruto agreed. Wait, everyone hates me because they think I'm a demon fox that attacked the village? Why would everyone antagonize me then? I mean, if I was a monstrous fox, I think upsetting me would be the last thing I'd do, Naruto said logically, tilting his head to the side. That does make an awful lot of sense, but honestly, I just don't like your luscious blonde hair. It's so unfair that you have such beautiful hair. You and that damn Yamanaka, I've hated you both for the longest time. He shouted in anger and accidentally losing his balance. He fell off the tree and slammed his head into the ground, knocking himself out. You do have beautiful hair. I can see why he's so jealous of it, Kami said, running her fingers through his hair. Thanks, Naruto blushed at the compliment. You have nice hair too, he returned the compliment. Oh, Naruto said, staring at his knocked-out teacher. That seemed very anticlimactic, he mumbled, turning toward his other sensei who was staring at his unconscious colleague. Yeah, kind of skips the whole emotional scene between Iruka and me, Naruto said, nodding his head in agreement with his other self. Iruka finally snapped out of his daze and looked at his blonde student. Naruto, close your eyes, I have a surprise for you, he said with a kind smile. Naruto blinked. I was just tricked by a teacher and now you want me to close my eyes on you? Seem legit, Naruto said, closing his eyes anyways. He kept them close until he felt something get tied around his forehead. Congratulations, Naruto, you pass, he congratulated. Oh wow, I don't really know why I passed though. Plot, that makes sense. The screen faded to black. Kami turned toward her fellow blonde. So, what did you think of that one? She asked, wanting his opinion like usual. Well, it was different than the last couple. I enjoyed getting away from the more serious worlds, but I feel like this one painted our world as kind of dumb, ya know? He answered with his own question. Some worlds are like that, almost like a parody in some ways. Still had fun. That's good. Naruto turned away from the screen and looked out the window filled with tall buildings. He was starting to get anxious sitting in the same spot for so long. Watching his different lives is interesting, he won't fight you on that. However, he doesn't want to do that for the rest of his existence. Hey, Cammy, can I go outside? He asked suddenly. Cammy glanced over at her fellow blonde, thinking it over. Letting Naruto loose on this world where his life is considered a story wasn't the greatest idea. Though, the people would just assume he's a cosplayer. After a bit of thinking, she conceded. I'll take you out later and show you some sights. Sound good? She asked, not really wanting to leave the television right now. Alright, he shouted excitedly. Okay, later though, like I said. Anyways, you ready for the next world? She asked, her finger hovering over the play button on her remote. When he nodded his head, she pressed the play button. The blank screen flashed to life. Naruto's eyes traveled down to his chest where he saw his best friend's hand sticking out of his chest. He coughed up blood, splattering his rival's clothes. How could you? He choked out, blood dribbling down his chin. His breathing became more labored and shallower, his eyes brimming with agony and betrayal. Sasuke, he whispered, his body falling limp on the Uchiha's arm as he took his last breath. Did I just die? Naruto asked out loud, but it was more to himself. Cammy stopped glaring at the Uchiha and winced at Naruto's tone. She turned toward her companion and put a comforting hand on his shoulder. It would seem you passed away in this world, she replied to his question. She looked back at the screen and glanced at the wound. The Uchiha's hand was sticking through his chest where his heart should be. A lethal wound that most likely destroyed his heart. Naruto let out a tired sigh. It's just hard to see my death by Sasuke, ya know? He said half-heartedly. He remembered this exact fight happening but ending differently. Seems like this version of himself wouldn't be seeing the future. Regret filled the Uchiha's eyes as he pulled his hand from his friend's chest. Naruto laughed pitifully. Well, at least he regrets it, right? He murmured. Cammy scrunched up her nose. It doesn't matter if he regrets it, he still killed you, she argued. She could care less if the Uchiha regretted his actions, she still murdered her companion. She idly wondered if she'd be smiting the brat in the future. A pitiful thump was heard as his body collapsed onto the ground like a puppet having its strings cut. He raised his hand in front of his face and stared at the blood-soaked appendage. What have I done? He thought as he fell to his knees. He felt a horrible sting in his eyes, and he knew he finally achieved the same eyes as him. You've become the very person you seek to destroy. Congratulations, little Uchiha, Cammy thought balefully. Tears of blood streamed down his cheeks as he looked at the body of the blonde. As the clouds covered the sun, the Uchiha desperately tried to rationalize what he had done. Your death won't be in vain, with this power I will achieve my goals. I promise, he thought to himself, before turning away and heading away from their battleground. Naruto deadpanned at the screen. Wow, thanks ya bastard, he said sarcastically. The heavens wept in despair. Nature roared in anguish. Oh, I'm upset, she thought before stealing a glance at her fellow blonde. Then again, I was always upset when my Naruto was in pain or hurt. When he performed that suicide technique, I was disheartened, she thought while running a hand through his hair. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the lowly goddess but shrugged it off and continued watching the scene play. A silver-haired man appeared on the scene soon after, soaked to the bone from the downpour. This storm came out of nowhere, he thought before pausing at the sight before him. His blonde student laid on his back, a hole the size of a fist where his heart should be. A stream of red-tinted water running away from him. He approached the body of his student and hesitantly kneeled beside him. He pressed 2 fingers against his neck and sighed when he couldn't find a pulse. I was too late, he whispered mournfully. He felt a familiar pain of losing another one of his precious people. Obito, Rin, Minato-sensei, I failed again, he thought sadly before cradling the blonde's body in his arms. Naruto frowned as Kakashi slowly carried him away from where he died. He didn't like seeing Kakashi looking so emotionally destroyed. It wasn't his fault that he died and didn't want his sensei blaming himself. This is what happened when you teach an emotionally disturbed kid an assassination technique, the blonde lowly thought. It took him a short while of jumping branch to branch to get the cooling body of his student back to Konoha. As he approached the gate, his eye lingered on the small group of people awaiting his return in the rain. His last loyal student, Sakura, looking around him hoping to see their traitorous Uchiha. Naruto let out another sigh. I honestly should have expected that, but it still hurts, he commented. She's always had tunnel vision when it comes to your teammate, Kami pointed out, getting a simple nod in return. Then the two others who were eyeing the blonde in his arms alarmingly. The Godem Hokage, Tsunade, and her apprentice Shizune. If he didn't despise his dark-haired student so much, he would almost feel bad for what would be coming his way. Oh yeah, Tsunade is going to break him if she ever gets her hands on him. Naruto chuckled lightly at the mental image. Something about seeing the bastard flung around as a rag doll appealed to him. Kami snorted at the mental image herself. Kakashi-sensei, where's Sasuke-kun? Sakura asked immediately, and he couldn't help but glare at her. She took a step back at the heated look before noticing her motionless teammate. Is Naruto okay? She asked hesitantly, holding a hand against her chest. Feeling just peachy, thanks for asking, Sakura-chan, Naruto said in a fox cheerful tone. The Hokage and her apprentice both rushed to Kakashi's side and snatched the blonde from his grip. They both grimaced at the large hole in his chest but quickly scanned his vitals. Tsunade and Shizune are both experienced doctors, so it only took them a second to conclude their knucklehead had passed away. Sorry Ba-chan, looks like I won't be taking the hat in that life either, Naruto said sorrowfully. Tears well within both of their eyes as they saw a flash of Naruto grinning at them while giving them a cheesy thumbs up. Tsunade blinked a few times and willed the tears back, her face becoming serious. Shizune, take Naruto's body, she started to order as Sakura gasped, to the hospital. Make sure his body is treated with respect, she said concisely. Shizune nodded mutely, curling the blonde's body in her arms closely. Her eyes trailed over the large wound on his chest and swallowed heavily. She vanished in a shunshin to do as ordered. Sorry Shizune-chan, he whispered to himself. Tsunade stared at the empty space for a few seconds before gathering herself. She took a long, deep breath and let it out shakily as she tried to ignore the faint traces of blood coating her hands. Kakashi, my office, now, she ordered before vanishing in a swirl of leaves. Sakura, who had been listening, finally turned toward her sensei. Naruto is going to be fine, right sensei? She asked hurriedly. The way they talked about the baka, it was as if he was dead. That isn't possible, he's too stubborn to die. He made a promise, he always keeps his promises. She thought assuredly, but the look her sensei gave her made her falter. She's not wrong in one regard. You're usually too stubborn to die, Kami stated. What ya mean? Naruto asked curiously. There is a world where you miraculously managed to talk your way out of the Shinigami's grasp, she said in an informative manner. Naruto blinked at that. I managed to talk my way out of death? He asked owlishly. The goddess hummed, indeed, and you even managed to get a summoning contract out of it. But that's for another time, she said before he could ask any more questions on that world. She wasn't sure he was prepared to bite into that forbidden fruit yet. I'm sorry, Sakura, but Naruto is gone, he said softly, turning his lone eye on his last student. Go home and decompress. Wait until you're called for a report. I have to report to Hokage-sama, he said tiredly before vanishing in the same manner as the cage. Sakura, suddenly alone in the rain, felt colder than before. She nodded her head absently in the direction her sensei was and made her way home. She felt tears prick at her green eyes as the day's events caught up to her. Kakashi knocked on the Hokage's office door and waited until he was given permission to walk in. He was going through a mixture of emotions and imagined it was the same for his cage. A few moments later he heard her say, "Come in," and opened the door. When he stepped inside, he saw Tsunade with a stern, hardened expression adorned on her face. He could see without his Sharingan that her eyes were filled with grief. She wanted to know everything, and so he did. He spoke of every detail of the grisly scene he walked upon. He gave his opinions of what he thought happened between his two students. When he finished speaking, he eyed his leader, who had a calculative spark in her eyes. Her hands were folded in front of her, head hung low. What do you believe should be done with Sasuke Uchiha? She asked the one-eyed shinobi. Kakashi looked down at the floor, his eyes flickering around as he thought about the question. What did he want to be done to the traitorous Uchiha? He closed his eyes and released a low breath. His eyes met his leader's and he knew what was going to happen either way. Sasuke Uchiha should be brought back to the village and held accountable for his actions, he stated, wanting justice for his blonde student. The Senju hummed to herself for a moment. Sasuke Uchiha will be placed in the bingo book wanted dead or alive. If brought back alive, he will face justice and be executed for his crimes. If he's brought back a corpse, he will be burned and his ashes scattered in the wind, she stated in an authoritative tone. You have no qualms about that, do you? The leader asked, but it was clear she wouldn't care about his opinion. He knew the crime for killing one of their own and deserting the village. No, Hokage-sama. Very well, you're dismissed, she said, waving him away. He deserves no less, Kami said, not feeling bad for the future of the Uchiha. Kakashi nodded his head stiffly and slipped out of the office. He made his way through the streets filled with a few villagers with umbrellas. He arrived at his lonely apartment and went inside. He pressed his back against the wall and slid down onto his rear. He sighed deeply. I'm sorry, Naruto, he whispered, losing himself in his memories and failures. It's not your fault, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said worriedly for his teacher. To him, it's going to be. You died because of the Chidori which he taught Sasuke. In his eyes, this is just another death on his hands, she replied. He only taught the technique and he told Sasuke not to use it on his allies. My blood is on the bastard's hands, not his, he argued. She looked over to the protective blonde and gave a faint smile. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just pointing out what he's most likely feeling, she stated softly. She watched him give a slow nod and turned back to the screen. When Kakashi left her office, she dismissed her Anbu guards and sat in silence for a few moments. She reached into her desk and pulled out some sake and took a long swig. As if a dam broke, tears started to flow. Damn you, brat, you were supposed to live, she clenched her teeth. Her head fell onto her desk after taking another swig. And so, the damn curse claims another one, she thought miserably as she drifted into her memories of her loved ones. Darkness took over the sky, and the moon shined down on Konoha. Things were going as normal except for something strange occurring in the morgue. Ah, this is most likely why this world was marked, Kami informed her fellow blonde. The blonde's body laid lifelessly on a metal slab in the dark when his body started glowing a faint gold. Chakra started emitting from him, warming the cold room, gathering around his body. The levels of chakra continued to rise, gathering the attention of the shinobi of Konoha. Shinobi of all ranks filled directly toward the site, joined by the Hokage and her apprentice. When they saw the blonde's body glowing, they paused. Hokage-sama, what do we do? A random jonin asked. Tsunade had rushed over in fear that someone was doing something to Naruto's body. She hadn't been expecting Naruto's body to be the source. She raised her hand. Hold off for now, she answered, hoping for some sort of miracle. The crowd watched as his body started to slowly turn transparent, as if looking at a spirit. The chakra continued to rise, yet the comforting warmth never left. Then, all the chakra condensed onto him and he burst in hundreds of small balls of light. Tsunade reached out to grab onto any piece of Naruto, but the light just passed through her before fading away. Well, that was unexpected, Naruto replied after a moment of staring. Ditto. I expected you to be revived or something of that nature, she commented. What do you think happened? I'm not entirely sure. On that day, Naruto's body had vanished off the face of the elemental nations. There was no sign, no hint or trace. It was as if he no longer existed. No one knew what happened, but people put together theories. Some argued that it was the Kyuubi dying once and for all. Most disagreed with that since they didn't feel any malice. Others assumed someone stole the boy's body. Some theories sounded silly, others more plausible. You have any theories? Naruto asked curiously. Kami rubbed her chin thoughtfully. I do have one, she relented and decided to elaborate. I believe your body may have turned into chakra and got released into the world. It would explain why no one could find a trace of your body, but I'm not sure if I'm right or not, she commented, tilting her head to the side cutely. I like your theory better than mine, Naruto replied with a shiver. What was your theory? That I turned into a ghost. Oh, I don't like ghosts. Fair enough. 3 long years passed by in the elemental nations. The world continued to move on without the blonde's presence. That would not last for much longer. Somewhere in a random forest, wisps of golden light started to condense onto itself. Very slowly for the last 3 years, the light was been making its way to this location. As the light continued to grow, it started taking a form. An older and distinctly male humanoid form. An explosion of chakra suddenly radiated from its body. A feeling of warmth shot over the elemental nations. Everyone felt it as if a wave of comforting warmth and innocence washed over them. At the epicenter of this chakra storm, the figure finished taking shape. He had glowing golden skin with a slightly darker shade of spiky golden hair. He wore a long golden cloak that appeared to be living flames with intricate black patterns over it. However, the most distinctive feature was his 9 golden tails swishing back and forth behind him. When he slowly opened his eyes, a vibrant golden glow emanated from them. "Well, I believe we were sort of right on you being revived," Cammy commented while staring at the blonde's new form. She had a small blush appear on her cheeks. Hot, she thought to herself. "I look so cool," he cheered in awe. His golden eyes looked around in confusion. He didn't know where he was, and his memories were all jumbled together. He could remember some things. He remembered a sage bringing him and his 8 siblings into the world, but he also remembered growing up in a village. He couldn't piece the two together, almost as if they were separate to begin with. "I think I merged with Kurama," Naruto said thoughtfully, and Cammy hummed in agreement. A feeling of serenity washed over him and he gazed up into the heavens. A shared soul of two brought together by the cold grasp. "You are our champion, our child of prophecy. You're our will. Fulfill your destiny and bring upon your judgment to this land." Multiple voices layered upon one another whispered to him. The feeling of serenity vanished alongside them. And so, the child of prophecy picked a random direction and began walking. He would judge the world for himself, but first, he needed to figure himself out. Sometime walking would give him time to clear up his thoughts. While he did that, the elemental nations scrambled together to investigate his appearance. The screen went blank, leaving more questions than answers. "So, I think I merged with Kurama, but I don't know what those voices are," Naruto said, breaking the silence. He didn't know how he felt about that. "Most likely some divine being," Cammy answered. "Like you? It very well could have been me that revived you in that world." "Wait, how does that work? Wouldn't you know if you did that?" he asked, genuinely confused. "Yes and no. There are multiple versions of myself out there, but we created one another to run different domains. We're connected with one another and can share our experiences whenever we desire. However, like me, we get bored, and if we knew everything it wouldn't help. This way, we don't know what's happening all the time while also always knowing what's happening all the time," she said as clearly as she could for her fellow blonde. Naruto nodded slowly at her explanation. "Now, what did you think of that world?" Cammy asked as usual. "Different, and I'm not sure I like this one," Naruto said honestly, and when Cammy continued to eye him, he decided to elaborate. "My death hurt my precious people. Tsunade Ba-chan, Shizune-chan, Kakashi-sense and everyone else I care for were hurt or feeling guilty for my death. I didn't like seeing them that way. I understand. We don't like seeing the people we love hurt. We'd do almost anything to protect what is ours," she commented. Yeah, we would." The sound of dripping water reverberated off the walls of the small bathroom. The paint on the walls had long ago begun to peel away, and the little light hanging from the ceiling flickered with an annoying buzzing sound. There is a rusty white toilet, a sink with a rectangular mirror hanging in front of it, and a cramped stand-up shower with only a flimsy curtain keeping water from leaking out. A small 5-year-old golden blonde-haired boy stood on a wooden stepstool in front of the mirror. His usual bright sapphire blue eyes stared ahead dully, bloodshot from the constant stream of tears. A single tear escaped his misty eyes, traveling down his whiskered cheek before splashing harmlessly against the sink. A thick black smoke erupted from behind the child, engulfing his form. It twisted in a storm of shadows and weaved itself together to form his most recent memory. Cammy whistled in appreciation. "This is quite cinematic," she said, getting a nod from her fellow blonde. "Yeah, but where did the smoke come from?" Naruto asked, tilting his head to the side. The small goddess watched the smoke take form while thinking about her partner's question. I believe it represents you zoning out while being lost in thought, she guessed. A forest near the orphanage took shape, the bright moon only slightly covered by clouds. Naruto stood frozen, his eyes staring wide-eyed in front of him. His best friend, Yumi, laid lifelessly against a tree. Much like himself, she was an orphan, growing up in the harsh, unforgiving world. They bonded over, receiving somewhat similar scorn from the populace. The villagers did not like her eyes, much like he assumed they didn't like his birthmarks. Naruto clenched his hands together as he watched the scene play out. He felt a hand rubbing his back, and he glanced over to his newest friend. She smiled at him before turning back to the screen. Yumi had dreams of leaving the village to explore the world and, one day, open up a small bakery. She pestered him constantly about going with her and living a simple civilian life. His resolve crumbled eventually. They both weren't liked, so why stay? They would have each other, and that was what mattered in the end. Though life is cruel and cold, would you have been willing to live a simple civilian life like this version of you? Kami asked curiously. Naruto pondered the question for a few moments. At that age, I would have been okay with it as long as I had someone who cared about me. Knowing what I know now, though, I don't think I could have ever lived like that, he answered honestly. The Akatsuki would have never left him alone. The village wouldn't have let him go, and the war would have caused too many problems. Her long seafoam green hair is dirty, matted with mud, along with her clothing. Her beautiful red slit eyes are half open, staring blankly ahead, glazed over. Naruto couldn't fathom how eyes that always danced with excitement and amusement could be so devoid of life. A small trickle of red ran from the corner of her mouth, reflecting light and dripping off her chin. His hands clenched tightly, his nails digging into his palms. His eyes misted with tears as a gentle hand rested on his shoulder. He looked up with tear-filled eyes, and they rested of a man he had met a few times. A kind elderly man who didn't treat him like a monster, but as another person. He often regaled him of tales of being a shinobi and told him how he could be a great one. "We'll find whoever did this, Naruto, I promise," the third Hokage said reassuringly as he guided him away from the scene of the crime. "I'm sorry for your loss," Kami said as she watched young Naruto shakily leave with the Hokage. "Thanks," he said with a sad smile. "Do you know if Yumi exists in my world?" he asked, hoping that maybe she survived and got to fulfill her dream. He may not have ever known her, but he already cared. The goddess' eyes glazed over for a moment before smiling. "Yumi does exist in your world. She's currently maintaining a small bakery, and is quite successful," she replied, her eyes twinkling happily. She snapped her fingers, and a plate of fresh sugar cookies appeared before them. "These were made by her, and yes, I paid for them," she stated before he could even question it. Naruto put his finger down since his question was answered before he could even ask. He grabbed one of the warm, soft cookies and took a bite. His eyes widened in surprise. "These are really good," he mumbled through giant bites of cookie. Kami chuckled heartily, enjoying her own cookie before turning back to the screen. During these more depressing moments, it's best to try and keep a more light atmosphere. A sad Naruto never felt right. The world around collapsed into a twisted mass of darkness, the sound of glass cracking echoing outward. The dark gave way to reveal a 12-year-old Naruto looking into his reflection. After that incident, and constant encouragement from his newest grandfather figure, he joined the Shinobi Academy. He hoped to become strong enough to protect the people precious to him. One day, when he retired from this life, he would open a small bakery. Yumi never left his heart. He pushed himself into his studies and trained himself into exhaustion. With his constant effort into his training, he managed to stay close to the top spot in the class. His tests weren't always perfect, and he made mistakes, lost some matches, but it just drove him to try harder. However, one jutsu eluded him throughout his schooling. The simple clone technique required precise and little chakra to work, but his argument always fell on deaf ears. He failed to graduate after all of his work, and it seemed another one of his dreams would be crushed. Then, like an angel hearing his plea, one of his teachers sought him out for a secret exam. It sounded suspicious, and he wished he would have listened to that little voice in the back of his head. "It appears you're destined to fall for Mizuki's trap," Kami said, amusement lacing her words. Naruto rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. "I was desperate to graduate, you know? I failed 3 times, and I wasn't exactly jumping in my seat to try a 4th time, he said in defense. Cammy simply hummed in response. The thick fog engulfed the blonde and gave form to another memory. Naruto stood in front of Mizuki, the teacher who promised him a particular exam to pass, breathing heavily. It had been a lie. Such a blatant lie that he should have seen through. What sort of test has you sneak into one of the most secure facilities and steal a village secret? The cost had been too high, as he gazed at the lifeless form of Mizuki. The man's eyes were frozen in pain, his hands limply wrapped around a large gash across his neck. The young blonde's hand shook as he slowly raised his hands to eye level. A thick coating of blood covered his fingers, drops of red dripping onto the fresh grass floor. A wave of nausea overcame him, and he relieved himself of his dinner. After a few moments of puking up his insides, he wiped away the bile from his mouth. His head shifted to the side, and he tried to blink away the newly forming tears. Another body laid face down with a large wound on his back. Iruka, one of the few people who cared about him, arrived just in time to save his life, but at the cost of his own. Something snapped in him, and a red-hot rage filled his veins. Everything became a blur as his body moved on its own. When the traitor lay dead by his own hand, he finally snapped out of his trance. Naruto's eyes and mouth widened in shock. This version of him had lost Iruka. He couldn't imagine a world without the man who had cheered him up whenever he felt down. To add salt to an already open wound, he killed someone in a blind fit of rage. Naruto slowly walked over to his favorite teacher, a man who he saw as an older brother, and cradled his cooling body in his arms. Fresh tears leaked from his eyes as memories of his best friend flashed through his mind. Why do I keep losing the people I care about most? He whispered through tears, rocking back and forth. Cammy wiped a stray tear from her eye at the emotional scene unfolding before her eyes. See her fellow blonde rocking back and forth, desperately holding onto someone he considered precious is depressing. Seeing such a broken version of Naruto was heartbreaking. She wrapped the blonde in a side hug, trying to comfort to stock still blonde. The sound of crying became more distant before ending with the sound of glass cracking as the memory faded away, revealing a slightly older Naruto. It didn't take long after for the Anbu to come and collect him. The Hokage explained his burden and why he kept it hidden from him, tried to comfort him about his recent loss, and finally allowed him to graduate with the rest of his class. Though his graduation felt hollow, and he would have traded it for Iruka's life any day. Naruto would have done the same thing. He closed himself off after that death, not wanting to feel that pain again. He became quiet, and his fellow classmates noted his shift in personality. Some tried to pick on him, but he didn't allow their words to bother him. Soon enough, a replacement informed them of their team placements. He was placed on a team with 2 people he disliked but didn't put up any argument. Hours passed before his team leader arrived. The man with gravity-defying silver hair ordered us to the roof and forced us to introduce ourselves. Kakashi, their teacher, came across as aloof, not giving any valuable information. Sasuke, one of his teammates, spoke coldly and distantly. Sakura, his other teammate, spoke energetically and brimmed with giggles and blushes. His introduction would have been filled with cheer and a declaration of his dreams. Instead, it was a simple, soft, and bare of any critical details. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I like gardening, baking, and ramen. I dislike, he trailed off softly, before shaking his head and continuing, my dream is to become strong. I wonder if I would have liked baking? Naruto thought out loud. Cammy smiled while munching on one of the sugar cookies. I think you would have enjoyed it as a hobby, she answered in between bites. It seems that this version of you doesn't desire to become Hokage, only become strong, she pointed out. How can a guy who can't save one friend become Hokage? Naruto said softly, looking down at the table in consideration. No, he just wants to become strong enough to protect what is his, he stated before looking at Cammy with a small smile. Plus, he wants to open up a bakery, ya know? He commented before looking back at the screen. You would have made a wonderful Hokage, Cammy thought. He tried to stay distant, to not form any bonds with his teammates. It worked for a while, but with every mission and training session, they grew closer. It was on their first C-rank mission that their bond solidified, and he considered them precious. They fought for their lives and liberated a country for a tyrant. With friendship, his smiles slowly came back, and he started to open up once more. However, like all good things in his short life, things would soon go wrong. Kakashi nominated them for the Chunin exams. 3 unknown tests that would test them on their abilities to see if they were worthy of being promoted. It would be dangerous. Death is a common occurrence, they were warned of that. They believed themselves ready, but they had been fools. I think I know where this is going, Naruto muttered, getting a soft hum of agreement from the goddess beside him. The first test went by quickly and without much difficulty. Though, much to Naruto's chagrin, he didn't appreciate the surprise pop quiz. He idly thanked the heavens that he was allowed to cheat. It was during the second stage of the exam that everything began going south for Team 7. A deadly shinobi targeted their group, actively searching for his teammate. They fought to the best of their abilities, but in the end, they laid broken with one of them being marked with a cursed seal. It was through sheer luck that they managed to survive and make it out of the forest. Naruto raised an eyebrow in surprise. He hadn't expected things to turn out just like his own. I expected them to fail, or possibly be killed, he commented in surprise. Kami nodded her head. They were once again surprised with preliminary rounds to help cut down the numbers. Sasuke and himself managed to pass while Sakura lost in a tie match against her rival. The competitors were given a month to train before the third phase of the exams. He took the time to refine his skills and learn some new tricks for an edge. Things seemed to be going well during the tournament, managing to defeat his first opponent. However, it was during Sasuke's fight that everything finally broke down. An invasion filled with death and despair rained down upon Konoha. Civilians and shinobi struck down, blood spilled on both sides, bodies littering the streets. Yet, the death of the villagers had been the last thing on his mind. No, the only thing that mattered to him was the safety of his friends. Kakashi ordered him to chase down Sasuke alongside Sakura and help him against the unstable Jinchuriki. Naruto clenched his hands, and his emotionless eyes stared back into his own as another memory took form around him. I have a bad feeling about this, Naruto said nervously, starting to see a pattern. Blood coated the grassy floor as his blue eyes stared wide in anguish. He didn't seem to notice the blood splatter on his face, with his focus only being on the dead bodies of his teammates. Naruto shut his eyes and let out a shaky breath. He felt Kami run her hand through his hair while pulling him into a close hug. He didn't like this world. Sasuke's lower half had been crushed, looking mangled beyond repair, but at least you could still make out his body. Sakura had not been spared that fate. She had been wrapped in a cocoon of sand and obliterated into a fine red mist. Kami watched her fellow blonde shudder. No, 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 not again. This can't happen to me again. He cried out in a mixture of emotions until one overcame every other. His sapphire blue eyes flashed to a deep crimson red, his features sharpening as hatred poured out of him. Red chakra exploded out of him and wrapped around him, as a multitude of tails began forming. Malice filled the air as a horrible pressure pressed down on the shoulders of anyone nearby. All of his hatred focused on one being. Come, Uzumaki, come prove my existence. The unstable Jinchuriki laughed crazily, his sand swirling around him like a sandstorm. The memory dissolved away, and the mirror in front of him cracked straight down the middle. Two blank eyes stared into his reflection, one a dull sapphire blue, the other a dark blood red. He felt his sharpened nails dig into his flesh, blood dripping onto the bathroom floor. He lost control and had no recollection of the fight between him and the crazed Jinchuriki. When he came to, he was bound up in a multitude of bandages in the hospital. He had been found in a crater, with most of his skin burned off. While recovering, he had been left with his thoughts. Naruto grimaced at the description. That meant his other went into a berserk, using at least 4 tails. Though, that brought up the question of who stopped him from completely losing it. It was doubtful he calmed down on his own, not with Kurama feeding his hatred. Yumi, Iruka, Sasuke, and Sakura. How many more would he lose? He wasn't strong enough to protect Yumi, and she paid for his weakness. He fell for an obvious trap, and Iruka paid for his stupidity. He was unable to defend his teammates, and their futures were gone because of him. Guilt consumed him. When would he stop failing? Of course, life hit him when he was already down. His grandfather in all but blood, the third Hokage, passed away in battle defending the village. He attended the funeral and watched silently. He was thankful that the rain allowed his tears to go unseen. It was a quiet, somber affair, but soon the repairs began, and life started to move on. With two of his teammates dead, Kakashi told him to take some time to himself. He didn't argue and just sat in his small apartment alone in the dark. A few days passed, and no one visited, but he didn't mind. Then, everything finally fell apart on a chilly night when he noticed a large file on his dining room table. He scanned his place, checked every corner, and double-checked his locks. He was wary, but his curiosity got the better of him. "I wonder what the file is," Naruto commented, looking at the file. Cammy sighed. "Probably nothing good at this point," she replied. Darkness swallowed him whole as his latest memory formed around him. Disbelieving eyes read over the information, reading certain parts over and over. The file is filled with information on him, a lot of it he didn't even know. A lot of it upset him, and he wanted to lash out, but it all crumbled away over a single mission scroll. An assassination mission ordered and signed by the third Hokage. Due to conflict of interest with Naruto Uzumaki, Yumi, an orphan of Konoha, is sentenced to death. The target's body should not be maimed, nor should the target experience any prolonged suffering. The target must be discovered by Naruto Uzumaki, and no one else. The area must be secured from prying eyes. Failure to abide by these orders will result in termination. This S-rank mission is ordered and signed by Hiruzen Sarutobi, Danzo Shimura, Homura Mitokado, Kaharu Utatane. Naruto stared at the mission outline in distress. Cammy was only slightly surprised by the outcome, having experienced more than a few vile versions of that man. Not every Hiruzen did what was best for Naruto, but what was best for the village. "I can't believe the old man would do something like that," Naruto whispered. The memory faded away, and the mirror shattered. Naruto slowly untied his headband and gazed at the metal, the leaf insignia etched into it. He raised a single claw and scratched a deep line into it before tossing it into the sink, turning away and walking out. The sound of his apartment door opening and shutting echoed through his nearly empty apartment. All personal effects removed and sealed away. The scene faded away before turning off completely. The small goddess let Naruto sit in silence for a few moments while he processed the new information. She simply rubbed his back in a comforting manner. "Why would he do that?" Naruto asked, staring at the blank screen. "There are numerous reasons for why he did what he did. I believe it was even hinted at in the beginning and confirmed by the wording of the mission," Cammy said, her fellow blonde turning to meet her eyes. "You were the village's Jinchuriki who planned to run off with Yumi and run a bakery. She talked you out of becoming a shinobi, and that wouldn't be good for the village. It showed that the Hokage actively encouraged you to become a shinobi. She was, as the mission stated, a conflict of interest," she responded with a small frown. Naruto sat silently for a moment and debated asking a question he didn't want to know the answer to. Would Gigi have done the same thing to me?" he asked quietly, hoping that this version of his grandfather figure was just an exception. "He would have done what's best for the village," she answered with a bitter smile. "Oh," he trailed off sadly. "He loved you like a grandson, never doubt that," she said, resting a hand on his shoulder before bringing him into a warm hug. The television flashed to life for the first time in what felt like years but was just seconds. Naruto and Cammy sat a bit closer to one another after the last world played. The comfort helped relax Cammy's fellow blonde. Naruto watched helplessly as his sensei, Kakashi, was captured in a water prison. He glanced around his surroundings before forming a plan. "Well, let's hope they agree with me," Naruto thought idly. "Oh, I remember this. I turned into a Fuma shuriken, and Sasuke threw me. It was badass," Naruto said, already feeling better at being reminded of his first significant victory. "It was impressive," Cammy acknowledged, getting a smile from Naruto. "Sasuke, Sakura, quickly lend me your ear. I have a plan," the blonde called out before hearing a wet, tearing sound from behind him. He turned to see his teammates holding out their ripped ears, still dripping blood. He gave them a deadpan expression. Naruto and Cammy both stared at the screen with deadpan expressions. Did they really just rip their ears off? Naruto asked, already knowing the answer with the evidence right in front of him. "Yup, thought so. Fucking metal," he heard his soon-to-be murderer, Zabuza, whisper. Cammy snorted at that comment. "I didn't mean literally. Put your ear back on, he shouted out. Oh, Sakura and Sasuke muttered before pressing the ear back against their head. Naruto heard a clicking sound before noticing their ears were perfectly reattached. That's not how that works. That's not how any of this works. Naruto bellowed as his teammates just snapped their ears back on like a toy. Huh, didn't realize your teammates were all Mr. Potato Heads, Kami mumbled absently. What's a Mr. Potato Head? Naruto asked, bewildered. A toy from another world. Don't worry about it. Alright, now here's the plan. Sasuke, you charge in and distract him the best way you can think of. Sakura, you stay back and protect the old man. I'll sneak around and flank him from behind, he ordered, getting a quick nod from both. You know I heard the entire plan, right? Zabuza asked before shrugging his shoulders. Lucky for you. I have short-term memory issues and already forgot it. Naruto chuckled and said, you know, it's kind of nice to see someone else getting picked on for once. Naruto dashed off to the side, and Sasuke took that as a sign to start his distraction. The sky turned off, throwing everything into darkness before a beacon of light landed on the Uchiha. He is dressed in a nice dark blue suit with a red and black striped tie. The Uchiha emblem is embroidered into it neatly. Strangely enough, Zabuza, Sakura, Tazuna, and even Kakashi, still trapped in a water bubble, found themselves sitting amongst an audience of faceless people. Wait, what? What's going on? Naruto asked in confusion. I'm not quite sure, but I have to admit. Sasuke dresses up well, Kami hummed. Naruto tilted his head side to side before grimacing slightly. I guess he does, but I definitely look better. I bet I'd look awesome in an orange suit. Kami pictured it in her head before remembering another world she had recently watched with her fellow blonde. A world with both boys being closer than usual. She imagined them both in school uniforms and started blushing slightly. I'm gonna find that world, she mumbled and started giggling, reminding Naruto of Kakashi or Jiraiya. Naruto stared at her worriedly before scooting a few inches away. He didn't know what she had just imagined, but he was sure it would be bad for his mental health. He knew that laugh far too well. Hey there, folks, I have something special planned for you all on this beautiful misty day. But first, what is the deal with carriage food? He asked the crowd, who all chuckled and clapped. I mean, come on. If I wanted to eat cabbage, I'd hang my kunai and become a rabbit. I don't get it, Naruto said after a moment. It's making fun of a silly joke from a different world. Ah, speaking of rabbits, funny story, a true story even. Sasuke raised his hands dramatically. Anyways, I'm walking down a dirt path with my team when a snow-white rabbit jumps out of a bush. I could have sworn I heard it say, "What's up, Doc?" He stated with a chuckle, getting a good laugh from everyone else. Kami chuckled a bit at that before turning toward her confused blonde. Remind me to show you the Looney Tunes later, she said before turning back toward the screen. Yeah, he didn't even offer me a carrot. The rudest little rabbit ever. I can understand why my knuckle-headed blonde teammate threw a knife at it. He laughed, getting a gasp from some of the audience. Don't worry, no rabbits were hurt in the making of this story, he explained, getting some relieved sighs from the audience. This rabbit is a distraction as a giant cleaver flies through the air. No joke, straight up glides right on past our heads. Almost caused my sensei to lose a few inches. That would have been tragic, honestly. With how much porn Kakashi reads, he needs every inch he can get. Sasuke stated in mocking pity, shaking his head. The whole crowd burst out laughing, while Kakashi looked a bit embarrassed. Naruto clutched his sides and roared with laughter. He almost rolled off the couch while trying to catch his breath. He started, choking between laughs, does need all the help he can get. Kami nodded her head, enjoying a good laugh at Kakashi's expense. Anyways, this large man appears on the sword. No, really, not near the blade but literally standing on it. I'm over here expecting him to declare that we killed his father and be prepared to die, he chuckled. Inigo Montoya would be proud, Kami said with a smirk. Another reference? Remind me to also have you watch The Princess Bride. Zabuza whispered to his captured victim. Hey, he's talking about me, he said excitedly. The man introduced himself as Zabuza. Look, the man could have easily been from Kumo with him trying to cosplay as Cloud. We all know that large blade compensates for something. Sasuke wiggles his eyebrows. Ah, sorry, shouldn't wiggle my eyebrows at a man who doesn't have any. I can hear the angry barking from up here. Seriously, this man gets into an epic fight with my sensei. Throwing punches, sword strikes, and, strangely enough, a collector's edition plushie of Princess Koyuki at one another. Did Kakashi just throw a plushie at Zabuza? I appreciate that Zabuza caught it and threw it back. Can we have a normal world after this? We'll see, but things started to heat up, or maybe cool down, when my teacher got trapped in a water prison. The crowd gasped in shock. I know. But, come on, man, drink the prison away. It's just water, he chuckled before shaking his head. I know things seem bleak, but I promise this story has a happy ending. My blonde comrade managed to sneak up behind the man and strike him in the head with a large rock, he stated, staring off into the audience. Huh, that's not how that happened. Wait, that's not what happened, Zabuza muttered before a large rock slammed into his skull, knocking him out cold. You see, that's why I never play Janken with Naruto. The last time I played, he almost took a finger with some scissors. He chuckled with some nostalgia. How vicious of you, Kami said in mock nervousness. Naruto gaped at the tiny goddess. That's the end of the show, folks. Thanks for coming out, and good night, he yelled out, getting exciting cheers and clapping from everyone in the audience before the light turned off. The world returned to normal with Sasuke dressed in his usual clothing and everyone back to their original positions. Nice work, Sasuke. That was a great distraction, Naruto said with a smile, holding up his drenched sensei. Sakura smiled and nodded, and Kakashi gave a tired nod. Sasuke smirked, gave a thumbs up, and said, "It's what an Uchiha would do." Naruto stared at the screen for a moment before shaking his head and falling backward into the couch. That's not at all the Uchiha way. From everything I've seen of them, it's, oh no, I have been wronged, time to destroy everyone and everything. While I'll agree with what you're saying, I think that was all just an elaborate genjutsu, Kami pointed out. So, if you think about it, that was actually the Uchiha way. Naruto raised a finger, put it down, and presented it again before putting it down for good. Kami smiled at the victory before swapping to the next world. That's all for now. If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments.